Hello, story enthusiasts. Welcome to Pika Fiction. We're thrilled to share with you what if Ash was betrayed by his friends and Lusamine offered him a kingdom to forget his past, enjoying the ride. Hit subscribe and join our growing community of story lovers. Your support fuels our creativity. And now, the story awaits. Chapter 1, The Fall of a Champion. The hall smelled like old wood and new lies. Ash Ketchum stood at the center of the Saffron City Grand Tribunal chamber, and he counted the cameras. 14. 2 mounted on the marble pillars flanking the elevated judge's bench. 4 handheld units from various networks jockeying for angles in the press gallery. 8 more scattered through the balcony seating, some professional, some held by spectators who'd waited in line since dawn to watch the world champion get crucified. He stopped counting. It didn't matter. Pikachu sat on his shoulder, ears flat, cheeks sparking faintly. Not from anger, from the static charge of 200 people crammed into a room designed for half that, every one of them breathing the same recycled air and radiating the same hungry anticipation. Ash reached up and scratched behind Pikachu's ear. The sparking stopped. "Mr. Ketchum." The voice came from the elevated bench at the far end of the chamber. Commissioner Aldrich didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The acoustics in the tribunal chamber were immaculate, designed centuries ago for psychic-type arbitration proceedings, where whispers could carry the weight of verdicts. Aldrich's voice filled every corner without effort, smooth and measured, the kind of voice that made reasonable things sound inevitable and unreasonable things sound like common sense. Ash looked up at him. Aldrich was a tall man, lean, somewhere in his 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair combed back from a face that belonged on currency. He wore the league commissioner's formal blacks, a gold pokeball insignia pinned to his lapel. His eyes were the color of slate, and about as warm. "Mr. Ketchum," Aldrich repeated, folding his hands on the bench before him. "You understand the charges as they've been read to you?" "I do." "And you understand that this tribunal has been convened under Article 14 of the Indigo League Charter, granting emergency jurisdiction over matters of public safety involving registered trainers?" "I understand what you told me it was convened under, yeah." A ripple went through the gallery. Not quite laughter, not quite a gasp. Something in between. Aldrich's expression didn't change by so much as a millimeter. "Then we'll proceed with witness testimony." Aldrich glanced to his left, where 2 associate judges sat, both league appointees, both carefully selected. Ash had looked into their records. One was a former Sylph Company executive. The other had voted to expand league regulatory authority 3 times in the past 2 years. Impartial tribunal. "Sure. The commission calls its first witness," Aldrich said. "Mr. Brock Harrison." Ash felt something cold slide through his chest. Not surprise. He'd known they would call Brock. He'd known since the subpoenas went out 3 weeks ago, since the League's legal machinery had started grinding, since the world had decided that the ultra wormhole over Lumio City was his fault and not the interdimensional crisis it actually was. He'd known. Knowing didn't help. Brock entered from a side door. He looked good, broader than Ash remembered, his jaw more defined, wearing the white coat of a certified Pokemon doctor over a button-down shirt. Professional. Put together. He walked to the witness stand with the steady gait of a man who'd made peace with what he was about to do. He didn't look at Ash. The tribunal clerk administered the oath. Brock's voice was steady throughout. When he sat down, he adjusted his coat, and for just a moment his hand trembled. Then it stopped, and his face was stone. Aldrich's prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Kessler, rose from the commission's table. She was good. Ash had watched recordings of her previous cases. She didn't grandstand. She built walls, brick by brick, until you realized you were sealed inside. "Dr. Harrison," Kessler began. "You were present in Lumio City on the night of the incident, correct?" "I was visiting Clement at the Lumios gym. We'd planned a dinner." Brock's voice carried easily. He'd always had that, a natural steadiness, a groundedness. It was what made him a good doctor. It was what was about to make him a devastating witness. Can you describe, in your professional medical opinion, the aftermath of the battle between Mr. Ketchum's Pokemon and the Ultra Beast designated Nihilego? Brock was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. 14 civilians were admitted to Lumiose General with injuries ranging from lacerations to blunt force trauma. 3 Pokemon, belonging to bystanders, not combatants, suffered critical injuries from redirected attack energy. 1, a Furfrou, had to be placed in intensive rehabilitation and may never fully recover motor function in its hind legs. The gallery was silent. I personally treated 2 of the civilians on site before emergency services arrived. A young girl, maybe 10, who'd been hit by debris from a collapsed storefront. And an elderly man who went into cardiac arrest from shock. Brock paused. Both survived. But the girl will carry scars on her left arm for the rest of her life. Kessler let the silence breathe. She was good at that. Dr. Harrison, in your professional assessment, was the level of force employed by Mr. Ketchum proportionate to the threat? And here it was. The moment. Ash watched Brock's face, searching for some crack, some hesitation. Some sign that this was coerced, that Brock was being puppet, that the man who traveled with him across Kanto and Johto and beyond was doing this against his will. Brock finally looked at him. His eyes were clear. Sad, but clear. No, Brock said. In my professional opinion, the response was disproportionate. The deployment of multiple high-level Pokemon in a densely populated urban center, without evacuation protocols, without coordination with local emergency services, it was reckless. The Nihilego could have been contained with targeted suppression. Instead, the battle escalated into a full-scale engagement that turned 6 city blocks into a disaster zone. And this pattern of escalation, Kessler continued, is it consistent with Mr. Ketchum's documented battle history? Ash has always fought at maximum intensity, Brock said, and for the first time his voice wavered, just slightly. It's what makes him extraordinary. But extraordinary and safe aren't the same thing. His battles have gotten bigger. His Pokemon have gotten stronger. And the collateral has gotten worse. Lumiose wasn't the first time bystanders got hurt. It was just the first time the cameras were rolling. Ash closed his eyes. When he opened them, Brock had turned away. No further questions, Kessler said. Ash's court-appointed defender, a nervous young man named Whitfield who clearly wished he was anywhere else, rose for cross-examination. He asked reasonable questions about context. About the fact that Ultra Beasts were interdimensional threats that didn't respond to standard containment. About the fact that Ash had saved Lumio City, and arguably all of Kalos, by engaging the Nihilego before it could reproduce. Brock answered each question honestly. Yes, Ultra Beasts were uniquely dangerous. Yes, Ash had ultimately neutralized the threat. Yes, without his intervention, casualties could have been far worse. But the damage was done. The footage of the destroyed blocks had played on every screen in the world for 3 weeks. Brock's testimony gave the footage a medical vocabulary. It turned chaos into negligence. It turned a hero into a hazard. Ash stood motionless through all of it. Pikachu's weight on his shoulder was the only thing that felt real. They broke for 15 minutes. Ash declined water. Whitfield tried to reassure him that the cross-examination had landed some points. Ash looked at him until he stopped talking. Who's next? Ash asked. Whitfield checked his tablet. Misty Waterflower. Ash said nothing. He walked back to his position at the center of the chamber and waited. Misty came in like she was walking into a battle, chin up, shoulders set, eyes forward. She'd cut her hair shorter since Ash had last seen her. It suited her. She wore a blue blazer over a white shirt, and she looked every inch the Cerulean City gym leader, which was exactly the point. She took the oath. She sat down. She folded her hands in her lap, and Ash could see her knuckles widen from 20 feet away. Kessler approached her with the same measured calm. "Ms. Waterflower, you've known Mr. Ketchum for approximately 10 years, correct? Since we were both kids." "Yes. And in that time, you've witnessed his battling style evolve considerably. I've watched him go from a boy who didn't know how to weaken a Pokémon before throwing a ball to the strongest trainer on the planet." Misty's voice was tight. Controlled. "I've seen every stage of that journey." "And at what point did you begin to have concerns?" Misty was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Aldrich shifted in his seat. Long enough that the cameras zoomed in, hungry for the crack in her composure. "After the Kalos League," she said finally. "After Ash Greninja. After he unlocked a power that literally fused his consciousness with his Pokémon's. I watched that battle on television and I thought," she stopped. "Started again. I thought, where does it end? How strong does he get before it stops being inspiring and starts being terrifying?" "Terrifying," Kessler echoed, letting the word hang. "He doesn't know his own limits. He never has. That used to be what Misty caught herself. That used to be what made him special. But we're not kids anymore. And his Pikachu can level buildings. His Charizard can crater mountainsides. What happens when the next Ultra Beast shows up in a schoolyard? Does Ash hold back? He doesn't know how." Ash felt Pikachu tense on his shoulder. He placed his hand on the small Pokémon's back. "Steady. Ms. Waterflower, has the League made any contact with you regarding the status of the Cerulean City Gym in connection with these proceedings?" The question came from Whitfield, standing for cross-examination with more spine than Ash had expected. Misty's eyes flashed. "That's not relevant to my testimony. I think it's relevant to your motivation for giving it. Isn't it true that the League's Gym Certification Board informed you 2 weeks ago that Cerulean Gym was under review for regulatory compliance, and that the review would be expedited based on your cooperation with this tribunal?" The gallery erupted. Aldrich gavelled for silence, his face betraying nothing. Misty's jaw clenched so hard Ash could see the muscle jump. "I'm here because Ash needs to be held accountable," she said, each word bitten off. "Not because of my gym. I'd say the same thing if I had nothing to lose." Maybe she believed that. Maybe it was even true. But Ash saw the way her hands shook when she stepped down from the stand, and he knew, she'd traded his future for her gym's survival, and she'd spend the rest of her life telling herself she hadn't. She walked past him. Close enough that he could have reached out and touched her arm. She kept her eyes straight ahead, and her jaw trembled once, and then she was gone. The afternoon session brought Clement. Clement was the easiest witness for the prosecution and the hardest one for Ash to watch. Because Clement wasn't angry. Clement wasn't compromised. Clement was just honest. He walked in with a slight limp, shrapnel from his own gym's collapse had caught his left leg. He'd built the brace himself. Ash could see the custom engineering in the joint mechanism. Clement sat down in the witness chair and adjusted his glasses, and when he looked at Ash, there was something worse than anger in his expression. There was sorrow. "Mr. Bonney, can you describe the damage to the Lumiose gym?" "It's Clement," he corrected quietly. "And yes. The Prism Tower sustained catastrophic structural damage when the Nihilago's energy pulse redirected he faltered. One of Ash's Pokémon's attacks into the tower's base. The entire eastern support column failed. The gym it's rubble. My lab. My inventions. Everything Bonnie and I built over the past 5 years. Gone." He said it without venom. That was the worst part. He said it the way you'd describe weather. "Were you able to salvage your Pokémon?" "Luxray and Chestnut were with me. Magneton was in the gym when it collapsed. He survived, but..." Clement's voice finally cracked. "He was buried for 6 hours before rescue teams reached him. He's recovering, but he won't be the same. Ash stared at the marble floor between his feet. He could feel every camera in the room pointed at his face, waiting for a reaction they could broadcast, analyze, and condemn. He gave them nothing. Kessler didn't even need to ask about accountability. Clement volunteered it. I don't blame Ash for fighting the Nihilego. Someone had to. But the way it was fought, without warning, without coordination, without any thought to the infrastructure or the people nearby, that's not heroism. That's chaos with good intentions. And I say that as his friend. His friend, Kessler repeated. You still consider Mr. Ketchum a friend? Clement looked at Ash again. I'll always consider him a friend. That's why I'm here. Friends tell each other the truth, even when it hurts. Whitfield's cross-examination was gentle. He liked Clement, everyone liked Clement, and he was smart enough not to attack a sympathetic witness with a limp. He asked about the nature of ultra-beast threats, about the impossibility of standard evacuation timelines, about the fact that Ash's intervention had prevented the Nihilego from burrowing into the city's underground and potentially poisoning the water supply for millions. Clement acknowledged all of it. And none of it erased the image of his gym in ruins, his magneton buried alive, the sorrow in his eyes when he said, "Everything Bonnie and I built." When Clement stepped down, he paused beside Ash. For a long, terrible moment, neither of them spoke. Then Clement put his hand on Ash's shoulder, the one Pikachu wasn't sitting on, and squeezed once. His eyes were red. Then he walked away, and Ash was alone again. The chamber had grown dim. Late afternoon light slanted through the high windows, catching dust motes that drifted like lazy butterfree. The gallery crowd had thinned slightly, bathroom breaks, coffee runs, the attrition of a long day of human suffering presented as jurisprudence. But the cameras hadn't moved. The cameras never blinked. Aldrich consulted with his associate judges in a murmur too low for even the chamber's acoustics to carry. Then he straightened and looked down at the floor. The commission calls its final witness for today. Ms. Serena Yvonne. Something in Ash's chest locked up like a seized engine. Serena entered from the same side door the others had used, but she entered differently. Misty had marched in like a soldier. Brock had walked in like a professional. Clement had shuffled in like a man carrying weight. Serena glided. She wore a cream-colored dress under a tailor jacket, her honey-brown hair styled in the elegant wave that had become her signature since she'd risen to fame on the Kalos performance circuit. She was poised. Camera-ready. And she looked at Ash with an expression he'd never seen from her before, not warmth, not admiration, not the quiet longing he'd spent years pretending he didn't notice. She looked at him like he'd disappointed her. Like he'd failed to be the person she'd decided he was. She took the oath. She sat. She crossed one leg over the other and folded her hands on her knee, and she was completely, unnervingly composed. Ms. Yvonne, Kessler began, and there was a new energy in the prosecutor's voice, the scent of blood. You traveled with Mr. Ketchum through the Kalos region for approximately 8 months, correct? That's right. And during that time, you developed a close personal relationship with him? I thought I did. Serena's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, an edge, honed by years. Ash has a way of making you feel like you're the most important person in the world when he's standing next to you. And then he moves on to the next battle, the next challenge, the next crisis, and you realize you were never the priority. The battle was always the priority. The gallery stirred. This was personal. This was what the cameras had been waiting for. Can you speak to Mr. Ketchum's mindset when it comes to combat? Ash doesn't fight to win, Serena said. He fights to push limits. His Pokemon's limits. His opponent's limits. His own limits. It's addictive to watch. It's intoxicating to be near. But there's no ceiling. There's no point where he says, that's enough. I stood on an airport tarmac in Lumio City years ago and she paused, and for the first time, something raw flickered across her face. She buried it quickly. I believed in him. Completely. And I watched him walk away and keep climbing, and I realized that the only thing Ash Ketchum will never outgrow is himself. Ash watched her, and he felt something he hadn't felt through Brock's clinical demolition or Misty's conflicted betrayal or Clement's sorrowful honesty. He felt it like a blade between the ribs, because she wasn't wrong. Not about all of it. She was wrong about the reasons, wrong about his heart, but she wasn't wrong that he'd never stopped to look back, never paused long enough to see who he was leaving behind. In your opinion, Kessler pressed, does Mr. Ketchum possess the judgment necessary to wield the kind of power he currently commands? No. No hesitation. No qualification. He's the strongest trainer alive. And that's exactly the problem. Because strength without restraint isn't heroism. It's a natural disaster with a face. The gallery erupted. Aldrich gavelled. Serena sat perfectly still through the chaos, and she didn't look at Ash, and that was worse than anything she'd said. Whitfield rose for cross-examination. He was shaken, Ash could see it. Serena's testimony had been a bomb, and Whitfield was standing in the crater trying to find stable ground. Ms. Yvonne, isn't it true that your performance career is partially sponsored by entities with ties to the Pokémon League's commercial division? My sponsors have nothing to do with why I'm here. And isn't it true that your last album of performance recordings saw a significant sales decline, and that the publicity surrounding this tribunal has already resulted in renewed media interest in? Are you suggesting I'm testifying against the person? Serena stopped herself. The mask slipped for just a heartbeat. Ash saw it, the pain underneath, the thing she'd armored over with poise and resentment. I'm here because Ash needs to hear what no one else will tell him. He's not invincible. He's not always right. And the world can't keep cleaning up after him just because he means well. She stepped down. She walked past Ash, and unlike the others, she stopped. She looked at him directly, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I waited for you, she said, so quietly that only he and Pikachu could hear. I would have followed you anywhere. You never asked. She left. Pikachu pressed his head against Ash's neck. The small Pokémon was trembling, not from cold, not from electricity, but from the sympathetic vibration of feeling his trainer's heartbeat go jagged and wrong. Ash stood in the center of the tribunal chamber, and for the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. The evening recess was supposed to last an hour. Ash spent it in a holding room that was technically not a cell but had a lock on the outside of the door and no windows. Whitfield came in looking like he'd aged 10 years. They're going to deliver the verdict tonight, he said, setting down a folder. Aldrich's pushing for immediate resolution. He's got the votes. What's the verdict going to be? Whitfield sat down across from Ash. He was young, maybe 25, with the look of a man who'd gone to law school to help people and ended up in the machine. Championship revocation is a certainty. They've got the charter authority for that. But Aldrich is pushing for something else. He opened the folder. His hands weren't steady. Pokémon redistribution under Article 19. Emergency seizure and reassignment of all Pokémon currently registered to a trainer deemed a public safety threat. The room was very quiet. They want to take my Pokémon, Ash said. They want to take your Pokémon, Whitfield confirmed. Pikachu's cheeks crackled. Not a spark, a sustained, low-frequency hum, the sound of a capacitor charging. The lights in the holding room flickered. Ash, Whitfield said carefully, watching Pikachu, I have to advise you that any resistance to the tribunal's ruling will be treated as, what did Dawn say? Whitfield blinked. What? Dawn Berlitz. She was on the witness list. She didn't testify today. What happened? Whitfield shuffled papers. There was an issue. She attempted to submit a counter-testimony supporting your actions. The commission moved to exclude it on procedural grounds. When she tried to give it anyway, she was removed from the witness list and asked to leave the building. Ash looked at the ceiling. A water stain spread across the plaster like a map of somewhere he'd never been. She tried. She tried, Whitfield agreed quietly. Okay. Ash stood up. He reached for his belt, 6 pokeballs, all of them occupied, all of them containing partners who had followed him across the world, through dimensions, into battles that would have killed lesser trainers and lesser Pokemon. Pikachu hopped from his shoulder to the table, and his dark eyes were locked on Ash's face. Ash, what are you doing? I'm not going to let them take my Pokemon. If you resist the ruling, they'll issue an enforcement order. League Rangers. Possibly military assistance if, I know. Ash, please. There are legal avenues. We can appeal. It'll take months, maybe years, but, while my Pokemon sit in some league facility being poked and prodded and redistributed to trainers who didn't raise them, didn't fight beside them, didn't bleed with them. Ash's voice was even. Calm. That scared Whitfield more than shouting would have. No. He looked at Pikachu. Pikachu looked back. No words were needed, they'd been partners for over a decade, and the language between them had long since transcended speech. Pikachu nodded once. Whitfield, Ash said. You've been decent to me. You should probably leave the room now. Whitfield stared at him. Then, slowly, he gathered his folder, stood, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, I think they're wrong. All of them. Then he left, and Ash heard the lock click behind him. He gave Whitfield 60 seconds to get clear. Then he said, Pikachu. Thunderbolt. The wall. The explosion blew outward. Brick and plaster erupted into the corridor in a shower of dust and debris, and the holding room's overhead lights died as the electrical system shorted out. Emergency lighting kicked on, dim red, institutional, and Ash was already moving through the breach in the wall before the first shouts echoed down the hallway. The tribunal building was old saffron architecture, heavy stone, high ceilings, hallways wide enough for Alakazam honor guards. Ash had memorized the floor plan during his 3 weeks of pre-trial detention. Left at the first junction, down one flight, through the maintenance corridor that ran behind the main courtroom, out through the service entrance that opened onto the delivery bay facing north. He made it to the first junction before he ran into security. 2 League Rangers, professional, armored, each carrying 3 Pokeballs minimum. They rounded the corner and pulled up short at the sight of Ash Ketchum standing in a cloud of settling dust with Pikachu sparking on his shoulder. Mr. Ketchum, stand down, the lead ranger ordered, already reaching for a ball. This doesn't have to, Pikachu, quick attack. Pikachu was off his shoulder and between the rangers before either could complete a throw. A yellow blur, not even aiming to strike, just passing between them at speed, close enough that the static discharge from his cheeks locked up their muscles for 2 critical seconds. The Pokeballs clattered from their hands. Ash was past them before they recovered, scooping Pikachu up without breaking stride. More shouts behind him. Boots on stone. He hit the stairwell and took the steps 3 at a time, years of running through forests and mountains and disaster zones paying dividends in ways no tribunal could quantify. The maintenance corridor was darker, no emergency lighting here, just pipes and conduit and the hum of the building's mechanical heart. Ash ran by instinct and memory, counting doors. 3rd on the left. He shouldered it open. The corridor beyond was wider, and not empty. A woman in League Blacks stood at the far end, arms crossed, a single Pokeball in her hand. Ash didn't recognize her, not a ranger, something else. She had the bearing of someone who'd been waiting. World champion, she said. Or should I say former? Ash didn't slow down. He pulled a Pokeball from his belt and expanded it in his palm. Greninja. Water Shuriken. The ball opened in a burst of light, and Greninja materialized mid-stride beside Ash, already forming the spinning water blade on its back. The woman's eyes widened. She'd expected him to talk, to posture, to give her time to deploy. She hadn't expected him to attack mid-sprint. The water shuriken screamed down the corridor, not aimed at her, but at the ceiling directly above her position. The impact shattered the overhead pipes, and a torrent of water crashed down, flooding the hallway and driving the woman back. By the time she'd released her Pokémon, a Starmie that materialized in the ankle-deep water, Ash and Greninja were past her, through the service door, and out into the saffron night. The delivery bay was cold. March in Kanto still carried the bite of winter, and Ash's breath fogged as he sprinted across the loading dock and vaulted the security barrier. Behind him, alarms howled through the tribunal building. Searchlights swept the grounds. He ran. Not away. He'd learned long ago that running away was just running in circles. He ran toward something, the Canal District, 3 blocks east, where the waterways would mask his trail from tracking Pokémon and the bridges would give him options. Greninja ran beside him, fluid and silent, matching his pace without effort. Pikachu clung to his shoulder, ears pressed flat against the wind. The city blurred past, neon signs, closed shops, the occasional stunned pedestrian who recognized his face and froze mid-step. He heard the helicopters before he saw them. 2 League aerial units, sweeping in from the north, spotlights carving white lines through the dark streets. Ash ducked into an alley. Pressed his back against the cold brick. Breathing hard. Thinking harder. Charizard. The Pokeball opened, and his Charizard materialized in the narrow alley with a grunt and a gust of heat. The flame on his tail threw dancing shadows on the walls. Charizard looked at Ash, looked at the helicopters, and his eyes narrowed with the particular expression of a Pokémon who had been through exactly this kind of situation before and had a low opinion of everyone involved. Straight up, Ash said. Above the cloud layer. Fast and dark. Charizard lowered his wing. Ash returned Greninja, climbed on, and felt Pikachu burrow into his jacket. Then Charizard launched, not with a roar, not with a dramatic flare. He'd been Ash's partner long enough to know when stealth mattered more than spectacle. He went up like a missile, wings tucked until the last possible second, then snapping open to catch the thermals above Saffron's Heat Island. They punched through the cloud layer in seconds. Below them, the city became a grid of lights, the helicopters became toys, and the tribunal building became a speck. Ash exhaled. The air was thin and razor cold, and his lungs burned, and his hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash, the delayed impact of everything that had happened in that chamber, every word from every friend who'd looked him in the eye and called him dangerous. Pikachu poked his head out of Ash's jacket and looked up at him. His small face was hard to read in the dark, but his eyes reflected the stars. "I know, buddy," Ash said. "I know." They flew south. The first night was the hardest. Ash landed in a forest north of Vermilion City, deep enough that the trees blocked satellite surveillance, dense enough that he could build a fire without the light carrying. Charizard curled around the small camp, his tail flame dimmed to embers, his body heat radiating like a furnace. Pikachu sat on Ash's knee, refusing to sleep. Ash released all 6 of his Pokémon, Pikachu, Charizard, Greninja, Lucario, Sceptile, and Gengar. They materialized in a small clearing and looked at him with varying degrees of concern, confusion, and quiet ferocity. None of them were afraid. None of them were uncertain. They just wanted to know what came next. "We're fugitives," Ash told them. He owed them honesty. He'd always owed them that. "The League wants to take you away from me. Redistribute you. Give you to other trainers." Gengar laughed, that unnerving, echoing cackle that made shadows dance. Lucario's paws clenched, steel blue aura flickering to life around his fists. Sceptile chewed his twig with an expression of supreme disinterest, as though the entire Pokémon League was beneath consideration. Charizard snorted a plume of flame that singed the lower branches of the nearest tree. Yeah, Ash said. That's what I thought too. He sat with them through the night. No plan yet, just the warmth of his team, the sound of the forest, the slow realization that everything he'd built over the past decade had been stripped away in a single afternoon by the people who were supposed to know him best. He didn't cry. He wanted to. He could feel it sitting in his chest like a physical thing, a pressure behind his ribs that wanted out. But if he started, he wasn't sure he'd stop, and he couldn't afford that. Not now. Not yet. Instead, he thought about Brock's steady voice describing injured children. About Misty's white knuckles. About Clement's limp. About Serena's parting words, spoken so softly they'd felt like a confession. I waited for you. I would have followed you anywhere. You never asked. He hadn't asked. She was right about that. He'd been so focused on the next horizon that he'd never turned around to see who was standing behind him. And now they'd all walked away, and the horizon was dark, and he was sitting in a forest talking to his Pokémon like a man building a raft after the ship had already sunk. Pikachu climbed up to his shoulder and pressed his face against Ash's neck. The small Pokémon's heartbeat was fast, always fast, that was Pikachu's way, but steady. Present. Real. We're going south, Ash said. Past Vermilion. There's a cargo port that runs routes to Alola. I know people don't, he stopped. Reconsidered. I used to know people. I don't know who I can trust anymore. But Alola's outside Indigo League jurisdiction, and the Ether Foundation has always been independent. If there's anywhere we can go where the League can't just reach out and grab us, it's there. Gengar tilted his head, grinning. Lucario nodded once, crisp and decisive. Greninja stood motionless, arms folded, awaiting orders with the patience of a blade sheathed. Sceptile spat out his twig and picked a new one. His way of saying, let's go. Charizard rumbled agreement, and the sound vibrated through the ground. Okay, Ash said. Okay. He didn't sleep. None of them did. The next 4 days were a masterclass in invisibility, ironic, given that Ash's face was on every news broadcast in 6 regions. Fugitive champion flees tribunal. Catch him on the run. League issues enforcement order for immediate apprehension. He watched the broadcasts on a cracked Pokegear he'd bartered for in a roadside town south of Vermilion, trading his jacket, his good jacket, the one he'd worn to the tribunal, for a device that barely held a charge. He sat behind a dumpster in an alley and watched Commissioner Aldrich give a press conference. Let me be clear, Aldrich said, his slate-gray eyes steady as bedrock. Ash Ketchum is not a criminal in the traditional sense. He is a profoundly gifted young man who has done extraordinary things for this world. But extraordinary individuals are not above accountability. His refusal to accept the tribunal's lawful ruling, his violent escape from custody, has only confirmed what the evidence already showed. He is a man who believes his judgment supersedes the institutions that protect us all. We wish him no harm. We simply ask that he come home, surrender his Pokémon for evaluation, and work with us toward a safer future for trainers and Pokémon alike. Ash turned off the Pokegear. He sat in the alley for a long time, watching pigeons, actual pigeons, not Pidgey, just regular ugly pigeons, fight over a crust of bread. He's good, Ash said to Pikachu. I almost believed him. Pikachu made a disgusted sound. They traveled by night. Charizard carried them over the open stretches, fields, forests, the gaps between towns where drone surveillance was thinnest. During the day, Ash moved on foot, cap pulled low, Pikachu hidden in a backpack that the electric type absolutely hated. Through Vermilion's outskirts. Down the coast. Past the old lighthouse where Bill used to live. He avoided people. Not out of fear, out of practicality. Every interaction was a risk. Every pair of eyes was a potential phone call to the League tip line. The reward for information leading to Ash's capture was already at 50,000 poke dollars and climbing. On the third day, he saw Brock on television again. A morning show interview. Brock looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. "I don't regret my testimony," Brock was saying to the interviewer, a blonde woman with sympathetic eyes and a predatory smile. "I told the truth. But I want Ash to know, if he's watching, that telling the truth about someone you love is the hardest thing you can do. And I hope he understands why." "Do you still consider him a friend?" the interviewer asked. Brock was quiet for so long that the producer probably had a panic attack. "I consider him the best person I've ever known," Brock said finally. "And I consider him dangerous. Both things are true. I don't know how to reconcile that. Maybe I never will." Ash turned off the poke gear and kept walking. On the fourth day, in a nameless port town that smelled like salt and diesel fuel, he found passage on a cargo freighter bound for Alola. The captain was a weathered woman named Kayla who recognized him instantly and didn't care. "You're the kid who saved the world a few times, right?" she said, leaning against the bridge rail. "And now they want to take your Pokémon? That's the short version. The world's ungrateful. What else is new?" She jerked her thumb toward the cargo hold. "Sleep in hold 3. Don't bother the mill tank. We dock in Hawaii in 6 days. How much? You got money? No. Then it's free. Consider it a tip for saving the world." She paused. "Or a bribe, in case you save it again and remember who gave you a ride." Ash almost smiled. It felt foreign on his face, like a language he hadn't spoken in weeks. The crossing took 6 days. The sea was rough and the cargo hold smelled like mill tank and engine grease, and Ash spent most of it in a hammock strung between 2 shipping containers, staring at the ceiling and letting the ship's motion rock him like a hand he couldn't see. He let his Pokémon out one at a time. The hold wasn't big enough for all 6 plus the mill tank. He trained with Lucario in the narrow space between containers, working through form drills until they were both drenched in sweat. He sat with Greninja during the night watches, the two of them cross-legged on the deck under a sky full of stars, practicing the meditative synchronization that powered their bond phenomenon. He let Jengar haunt the engine room, which terrified the crew but improved their productivity dramatically. He sat with Pikachu on the bow and watched the horizon, and he didn't talk about what had happened, and Pikachu didn't push, because some silences need to run their course. On the 5th night, Ash dreamed. He was back in the tribunal chamber, but it was empty, no cameras, no gallery, no judges. Just him, standing in the center of the room, and his friends sitting in a circle around him. Brock. Misty. Clement. Serena. They were all talking, but he couldn't hear the words. Their mouths moved, and the air was full of sound, but none of it reached him. He was sealed in glass, and they were outside, and no matter how hard he pressed his hands against the barrier, it wouldn't break. He woke up with Pikachu's paws on his chest and the sound of the mill tank lowing in the dark hold, and he lay there breathing until his heartbeat slowed, and he thought, "I will not let this break me. I've been knocked down before. I've lost before. I've failed before. This is different. This is worse. But I am still here. My Pokémon are still here. And as long as that's true, I'm not done." He said it in his head like a mantra, over and over, until the words stopped being words and became a rhythm, a heartbeat, a promise. Then the ship's horn sounded, and Captain Kayla's voice crackled over the intercom, Alola off the port bow. "Welcome to paradise, runaway." Ash climbed the ladder out of the hold, and the light hit him like a wall. Alola was gold and green and blue, the way a dream looks before you fully wake up. Hawaii City spread along the coast like a smile, white buildings and swaying palms and water so clear it looked like someone had poured the sky into the ocean. The air smelled like plumeria and salt, and it was warm, genuinely, honestly warm, the kind of warmth that seeped into your bones and loosened knots you didn't know you were carrying. Ash stepped off the freighter onto the Hawali docks with Pikachu on his shoulder and nothing else. No money, no clean clothes, no plan beyond, don't get caught. He looked like what he was, a 20-year-old who'd been sleeping in a cargo hold for 6 days, running from everything he'd built. He walked through the dock district, past the marina, along the beachfront where tourists and locals moved with the unhurried pace of people who'd never had the world turn on them. He drew glances, he always did, even before the tribunal. There was something about him, some quality of presence that made people look twice. The cap. The set of his jaw. The Pikachu on his shoulder with the knowing eyes. Nobody stopped him. Nobody called the League. In Alola, people minded their own business with the same dedication they applied to their tan lines. He walked until the beach curved away from the city, until the tourists thinned and the palms gave way to wild shoreline, volcanic rock and white sand and the sound of waves that had been breaking against this coast since before human beings had thought to throw pokeballs. He sat down on the sand. Pikachu hopped off his shoulder and sat beside him. The sun was going down, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet that no screen could reproduce. Ash sat there and felt nothing. Not peace, not pain, not purpose. Just the strange emptiness of a man who'd been running so hard that he'd outpaced his own emotions and arrived at a place where none of them had caught up yet. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from behind him. Ash didn't startle, he'd heard the footsteps, light but deliberate, on the sand behind him. His body had been trained through years of ambushes, surprise battles, and Team Rocket attacks to catalog every sound in his environment, even when his mind was somewhere else. He turned his head. The woman standing 10 feet behind him was tall. Not unusually so, but she carried herself in a way that added inches, spine straight, chin level, shoulders back. She wore white, a white dress that caught the sunset light, a white lab coat open over it, white heels that were frankly absurd for beach walking. Her blonde hair fell past her shoulders, immaculate, as though wind and humidity were phenomena that happened to other people. Lusamine. Ash knew her face. Everyone did. President of the Ether Foundation, the largest privately funded Pokémon conservation organization in the world. Billionaire. Scientist. The woman who'd once lost her mind to an Ultra Beast's toxins and tried to merge with another dimension, and who'd clawed her way back and rebuilt her empire with the same ferocious will that had nearly destroyed it. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't immediately categorize. Not pity. Not amusement. Something sharper, assessment. The look of a woman who was deciding whether the thing in front of her was worth her time. Ms. Lusamine, Ash said. Just Lusamine. She walked forward, and her heels didn't sink into the sand. He had no idea how she managed that. I've been tracking you for 4 days, Mr. Ketchum. Your operational security is impressive for a man with no intelligence training. Using the cargo freighter was smart, the League's surveillance network doesn't flag commercial shipping routes. But you pinged a cell tower in the port district 2 hours ago when you powered on your pokegear. Ash looked at the cracked pokegear in his pocket. He'd turned it on to check the time. Rookie mistake. Are you here to turn me in? Lusamine's eyebrows rose by a fraction, enough to convey that the question was beneath both of them. If I wanted to turn you in, you'd already be in custody. I own the surveillance infrastructure on this island. The League doesn't sneeze in Alola without my database logging it. She walked past him and stopped at the water's edge, looking out at the ocean. The sunset framed her in gold and shadow, and Ash thought, with the distant clarity of exhaustion, that she looked like something carved rather than born. A statue with a pulse. I watched your tribunal, she said. All of it. Every testimony. Every one of your friends, she paused on the word, as though testing its weight. Every one of them standing up there and telling the world that Ash Ketchum is too dangerous to be free. They weren't all wrong. Lusamine turned and looked at him. Really looked, not at the fugitive champion, not at the media narrative, but at him. At the shadows under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders and the Pikachu sitting beside him who hadn't left his side through any of it. No, she agreed. They weren't all wrong. You are dangerous. Your Pokémon are dangerous. You fight with an intensity that most trainers can't comprehend, let alone match. The Lumiose incident caused real damage and real suffering, and no amount of context erases that. Ash said nothing. He hadn't come here looking for absolution, and he wasn't going to argue with the truth. But here's what your friends failed to mention, Lusamine continued, and her voice sharpened, cutting through the warm air like a blade through silk. You were the only trainer in Lumio City who engaged the Nihilego. The only one. The League had 3 elite response teams within deployment range, and none of them were scrambled. The Kalos military had aerial units stationed at Coumarine Air Base, 20 minutes by jet. Nobody came. Nobody fought. Except you. She let that sit. The wormhole opened without warning. The Nihilego emerged in a populated area. You had seconds to decide, engage in an urban environment with all the risks that entailed, or wait for backup that wasn't coming while that thing burrowed into the city and started parasitizing civilians. You made the only choice a person with your abilities and your conscience could make. And then the world punished you for it. I could have been more careful, Ash said. I could have, you could have been slower. More cautious. More measured. And 40 more people would have been poisoned by Nihilego toxins before the League decided to act. Lusamine turned fully to face him, and the assessment in her eyes had resolved into something definite. I'm not here to tell you you're blameless, Ash. I'm here because I know what it looks like when powerful people are punished for being powerful, and I know where that road ends. It ends with the people who should be protecting the world sitting in cells while bureaucrats argue about jurisdiction and the threats keep coming. Pikachu was watching Lusamine with unblinking intensity. His cheeks sparked once, a test, a probe, the Pokémon equivalent of sizing someone up. Lusamine glanced at him, and the corner of her mouth twitched. Your Pikachu is deciding whether to trust me, she said. Good. He should be skeptical. I would be. You said you've been tracking me, Ash said. Why? Lusamine reached into her lab coat and pulled out a slim tablet. She tapped the screen, and a holographic display flickered to life above it, a map of the world, overlaid with dozens of pulsing red markers. Wormholes, she said. 47 confirmed ultra-wormhole events in the past 6 months. The one in Lumiose was the largest, but it wasn't the first and it won't be the last. The frequency is accelerating. The League is treating each one as an isolated incident. They're wrong. Ash studied the map. The red markers were clustered in certain regions but spreading, Kanto, Kalos, Hoenn, Alola. A pattern, but not a natural one. Too regular. Too evenly spaced. Someone's causing them, he said. Lusamine looked at him with something that might have been approval. That's what I believe. The energy signatures don't match natural wormhole formation. There's an artificial component, a resonance pattern that suggests extraction technology. Someone is pulling energy from ultra space, and every extraction weakens the dimensional barrier further. Extraction technology. Ash looked at her. Your extraction technology. Ether Foundation developed the first ultra space probes. If the accusation bothered her, she didn't show it. Yes. My technology. Built during a period of my life when I was, she paused, choosing her words with care. Unwell. Obsessed. I built tools to reach into ultra space, and those tools were powerful, and I was not careful about who had access to the designs. Aldrich. Lusamine's eyes flickered. You know. I don't know anything for certain. But I watched that man orchestrate the political destruction of my entire life in a single afternoon without breaking a sweat. A man like that doesn't do something that elaborate unless he's protecting something bigger than his reputation. Ash stood, brushing sand from his jeans. He was taller than Lusamine by a few inches, even with her heels. What does he want? I don't know yet. But I intend to find out. Lusamine put the tablet away and faced him squarely. Which brings me to why I'm here. She gestured behind her, and for the first time Ash noticed the aircraft parked on the bluff above the beach. White. Sleek. The Ether Foundation logo gleaming on its hull. A transport, large enough for a squad and their Pokémon. I'm not offering you charity, Lusamine said. I don't do charity. I'm offering you a position. A purpose. A kingdom, if you want to think of it that way. She met his eyes without flinching. Ether Paradise is the most advanced research and defense facility in the world. It's sovereign territory under international maritime law, the League has no jurisdiction there. I have resources, technology, intelligence networks, and a staff of 500 who are very good at their jobs. What I don't have is a trainer capable of fighting what's coming. And what's coming? The end of the dimensional barrier. Ultra space collapsing into our reality. Every ultra beast that ever existed pouring through into a world that isn't prepared. Lusamine's voice was steady, but beneath the steadiness, Ash heard it, the edge of real fear, the kind that only comes from understanding exactly how bad things can get. The League won't see it until it's too late. They're too busy congratulating themselves for taking down the world champion to notice that the sky is falling. Pikachu jumped to Ash's shoulder. The small Pokémon looked from Ash to Lusamine and back again, and his expression was one Ash had seen many times before, the expression of a partner who'd already made his decision and was waiting for his trainer to catch up. I know what you've lost, Lusamine said. I know what it feels like to have everyone you trusted walk away. It happened to me, my children, my staff, my own mind. I spent years rebuilding. I'm still rebuilding. And I'm telling you, Ash, with absolute certainty, looking backward will kill you. Not quickly, slowly. The replaying, the analyzing, the wondering what you could have said differently. It's poison. I know because I drank it for years. She extended her hand. Not a handshake, an open palm, offered like a lifeline. Come with me. Forget what was. Build something new. Everyone else in the world just told you that you're too dangerous. Her green eyes burned in the dying light. I'm telling you that you're not dangerous enough. Not yet. Ash looked at her hand. He looked at the ocean, vast, dark, indifferent. The world that had thrown him away. The friends who had stood up in a marble hall and traded his future for their comfort. He looked at Pikachu. Pikachu's dark eyes were steady, and his small jaw was set, and he gave one short, sharp nod. Ash took her hand. Her grip was stronger than he expected, firm, warm, decisive. She didn't smile. She did something better, she looked at him like he mattered. Not as a symbol or a weapon or a cautionary tale, but as a person who'd earned the right to stand where he was standing. Good, she said. Welcome to Ether Paradise. The transport lifted off from the bluff with a hum of anti-gravity generators, and Ash watched Melee Island shrink beneath them, the beach where he'd sat, the city where he'd landed, the ocean that had carried him from one life to whatever came next. Lusamine sat across from him, legs crossed, already working on her tablet. She looked up once and caught him staring, and something softened in her expression, just for a moment, just around the eyes. You're wondering if you can trust me, she said. Not a question. I'm wondering if I can trust anyone. Smart. She returned to her tablet. Don't trust me because I asked you to. Trust me because of what I do. Words are cheap. Actions have weight. Pikachu curled up in Ash's lap and fell asleep for the first time in 6 days. Ash put his hand on the small yellow body and felt the heartbeat under his palm, fast and steady and alive. The transport banked east, and Ether Paradise appeared on the horizon. It was massive. A floating island of white and glass, anchored in the deep ocean between Alola's islands like a cathedral built on water. Spires rose from its central structure, gleaming in the last light. Research domes clustered along its edges, their transparent walls revealing glimpses of contained ecosystems, forests, deserts, aquatic environments, all maintained for Pokémon conservation. Docking bays lined its waterline, and smaller craft moved around its perimeter like attendants around a throne. It was beautiful. And it was a fortress. The upper levels are research and administration, Lusamine said, noting his gaze. Conservation habitats on the midsection. Defense grid and tactical operations below the waterline. The facility can sustain 3,000 people indefinitely and withstand a Category 5 hurricane. She paused. It can also deploy an electromagnetic barrier capable of disrupting ultra-wormhole formation within a 50-mile radius. I built that one myself, after I recovered. The transport descended toward a private landing platform on the upper level, separate from the main docking bays, accessible only by authorized aircraft. As they touched down, Ash saw figures waiting, Aether employees in white uniforms, standing in neat ranks. Not a welcoming committee. A staff briefing. Lusamine stood and adjusted her lab coat with the practiced ease of a woman who'd done it 10,000 times. I'll have quarters prepared for you and your Pokémon. Full access to training facilities, research archives, and the Tactical Operations Center. You'll meet my senior staff in the morning. And your family? Something crossed Lusamine's face, not pain, exactly, but the memory of pain. Gladion and Lily are here. They'll have opinions about your presence. I'll handle that. You don't need to handle it. I can deal with opinions. Lusamine looked at him, and that almost smile appeared again. Yes. I believe you can. The platform doors opened, and the night air of Aether Paradise rushed in, salt and steel and the faint ozone tang of high-energy research equipment. Ash stepped out onto the platform, Pikachu waking on his shoulder, and looked up at the facility rising around him like the walls of a kingdom. Behind him, the world. The tribunal. The friends who'd become strangers. The championship that had become a cage. The name that had become a target. In front of him, Lusamine. Her facility. Her war. Her offer of something he hadn't dared to want, a place to stand and fight, not for approval or acclaim, but because the fight was real and he was the one who could make a difference. He walked through the doors of Aether Paradise's command center. They sealed behind him with a sound like a vault closing. Or like a crown being placed. Ash Ketchum had been the world champion. Now he was something else. He didn't know what yet. But he was going to find out. Chapter 2, The Kingdom of Glass. Ash woke to the sound of the ocean and the absence of fear. It took him a moment to place himself. White ceiling. White walls. A bed that was actually a bed, not a hammock in a cargo hold, not a patch of forest floor, not a bench in a tribunal holding room. Real sheets. A real pillow. A window that stretched floor to ceiling, and beyond it, nothing but water and sky, the line between them blurred by early morning haze. Pikachu was already awake, sitting on the windowsill with his nose pressed against the glass, watching a pod of mantine leap through the waves below. His ears perked when Ash stirred, and he turned with the expression of a Pokémon who had slept well for the first time in weeks and was deeply suspicious of the feeling. Yeah, Ash said, sitting up. I don't trust it either. He showered, real hot water, not a river, not a dock hose, and found clothes laid out on the desk. Not the Aether Foundation white. Just clothes, dark jeans, a black fitted shirt, a jacket in charcoal gray. His size. Someone had paid attention. He dressed, clipped his belt with its 6 pokeballs, and looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He looked older than 20. The past month had carved lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his jaw was sharper, weight lost to stress and bad food. But his eyes were clear. That mattered. Broken people had cloudy eyes. He'd seen it. He wasn't there. Not yet. He put on his cap. The old one, red and white, worn soft. The one constant. Let's go see what we bought into, he told Pikachu. Ether Paradise was alive in a way that surprised him. He'd expected sterility. A research facility floating in the ocean, all white surfaces and humming machines and people in lab coats speaking in jargon. And there was that, plenty of it. But there was also warmth. In the conservation levels, where artificial sunlight poured through transparent domes onto carefully maintained ecosystems, he saw Pokémon moving freely. Not caged. Not restrained. Comfey drifting through flower gardens. Stufful tumbling over each other in a grassy enclosure. A Drampa curled around a cluster of sleeping Jangmo-o, its ancient eyes tracking Ash as he walked past the observation window. The staff noticed him. Of course they did, he could feel the ripple of recognition move through every corridor he walked. Whispers. Double takes. A young researcher nearly walked into a wall. But nobody approached him with hostility. A few nodded. One woman, middle-aged, with the calloused hands of someone who worked with Pokémon directly, stopped and said, "Mr. Ketchum, the training platforms are on sublevel 3. I set up a battle configuration for you this morning, in case you needed to work off some energy." Ash looked at her. "Did Lusamine tell you to do that?" "No. I watched your Sinnoh League matches when I was in grad school. You inspired me to work with Pokémon instead of just studying them." She smiled. Sublevel 3, East Wing. The platforms can handle anything up to hyper beam intensity. She walked away before he could respond. Pikachu made a small approving sound. Sublevel 3 was a revelation. The training platform was the size of a regulation battle arena, but built with materials Ash had never seen, some kind of reinforced composite that absorbed kinetic energy on impact, preventing damage from ricocheting into the facility's structure. The ceiling was high enough for aerial combat. Targeting drones sat in charging stations along the walls, programmable for speed, evasion patterns, and simulated attack types. Ash released his team. All 6 of them materialized on the platform, and for a moment they just stood there, Pikachu, Charizard, Greninja, Lucario, Sceptile, Gengar, taking in the space. Then Charizard snorted a flame that licked the ceiling, and the composite absorbed the heat without a mark. Ash grinned. "First time in weeks." "Full rotation," he said. "Combat pairs. Lucario and Greninja, speed drills. Charizard and Sceptile, power exchanges. Gengar, you're on evasion, I want you phasing through attacks, not around them. Pikachu, you're with me." They trained for 3 hours. Ash didn't hold back, and neither did his Pokémon. The platform rang with impacts, Lucario's aura spheres detonating against Greninja's water shuriken, Charizard's flamethrower clashing with Sceptile's leaf blade in explosions of steam and light, Gengar dissolving into shadows and reforming behind the targeting drones fast enough to make them spin in confused circles. Ash worked with Pikachu on precision. Not power, Pikachu had more than enough power. What they needed was control. Surgical strikes. The ability to take out a target in a crowded space without leveling everything around it. Because the next fight was coming, and it wouldn't be in an open field. Iron Tail. Third drone. Left side only. Pikachu launched from his shoulder, tail glowing silver, and struck the drone on its left flank with a precision that sent it spinning but didn't shatter it. The drone wobbled, recalibrated, and resumed its pattern. Again. Fourth drone. Top quarter. Strike. Clean. Controlled. Again. Moving targets. All of them. Pikachu became a blur of yellow and silver, bouncing between drones like a pinball with intent, each strike hitting exactly where Ash called it. Not a single miss. Not a single wasted motion. This was what the tribunal hadn't understood. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't recklessness. This was a trainer and his Pokemon operating at a level so far beyond standard battling that the people judging him literally couldn't comprehend what they were looking at. They saw destruction and called it negligence. They didn't see the thousands of hours of training, the bone-deep synchronization, the split-second calculations that turned every battle into a controlled demolition. Not bad. The voice came from the observation gallery above the platform. Ash looked up. Gladion stood behind the railing, arms crossed, his blonde hair falling over one eye in that deliberately careless way that probably took 20 minutes to achieve. He wore black, of course he did, and his expression was the carefully maintained neutral of someone who was trying very hard not to be impressed. Silvally stood beside him. The synthetic Pokemon's crest shifted colors as it observed the training below, reading the emotional temperature, processing threat levels. Its eyes locked on Pikachu, and something in its posture tightened. Gladion, Ash said. He recalled his team except for Pikachu, who returned to his shoulder. Your mother told me you'd have opinions. My mother tells people a lot of things. Gladion descended the stairs from the gallery, Silvally following like a shadow. He moved with the coiled energy of a trainer who was always half a second from reaching for a Pokeball. Ash recognized it because he moved the same way. She also told me she was bringing the world champion to Ether Paradise to help fight an interdimensional crisis. What she actually brought is a fugitive with a bounty on his head and 6 Pokemon the League wants to confiscate. Both things are true. Gladion stopped at the edge of the platform. He was taller than Ash remembered, the gangly teenager had filled out, angular but solid, with his mother's sharp features and his father's serious eyes. He looked at Ash the way he looked at everything, like he was calculating whether it was going to be a problem. My mother has a pattern, Gladion said. She finds something powerful. She becomes fascinated by it. She convinces herself that she can control it, that it'll be different this time, that her obsession is justified because the cause is right. And then everything falls apart, and the people around her pay the price. I'm not a Nihilego. No. You're worse. A Nihilego doesn't have choices. You do. And from what I've seen, your choices tend to leave craters. Gladion's hand rested on Silvally's crest. So here's my question, Ketchum. My mother's offering you a kingdom. What are you actually going to do with it? Ash was quiet for a moment. He could feel Pikachu tensing on his shoulder, ready for a fight that might be verbal or physical or both. Around them, the training platform hummed with residual energy from the morning session. I don't know yet, Ash said. But I'm not going to lie to you about it. Your mother gave me a place to stand when nobody else would. That matters. But I'm not here to be her weapon or her project. I'm here because there's a fight coming, and I'd rather face it than run from it. Gladion studied him. Silvally's crest cycled through colors, amber, blue, settling on a steady green that Ash didn't know how to interpret. Prove it, Gladion said, and pulled a Pokeball from his belt. Ash looked at the ball. Looked at Gladion. Looked at Silvally. Right now. Right now. Full rules. No substitutions. You want to stand in my mother's kingdom, you stand against me first. Gladion's voice hardened. I've spent 3 years protecting this place and the people in it. I'm not handing that responsibility to a stranger because my mother says so. Pikachu's cheeks sparked. Ash put his hand on the small Pokemon's back. Pikachu, sit this one out. Pikachu looked at him with visible offense. I know. But this isn't about power. It's about respect. Pikachu grumbled but hopped off his shoulder and took a position at the edge of the platform. Ash pulled a Pokeball from his belt and weighed it in his hand. Lucario, he said, and the ball opened. Lucario materialized in a crouch, aura sensors rising, instantly reading the room. His gaze snapped to Silvally, and his paws clenched. 2 warriors recognizing each other. Gladion didn't waste time. Silvally. Multi-attack. Silvally lunged, fast, brutally fast, its claws igniting with normal-type energy that shifted to fighting as its memory drive activated. The attack came in low, sweeping for Lucario's legs. Metal Claw. Redirect. Lucario met the strike with shining steel claws, catching Silvely's attack at the joint and redirecting the momentum sideways. Silvely skidded across the platform, claws scoring lines in the composite surface. They were testing each other. Ash could see Gladion doing the same thing. He was reading patterns, probing weaknesses, building a map of the opponent's instincts before committing to a strategy. It was high-level battling. The kind that happened above the conscious mind, in the space where trainer and Pokémon became a single calculating entity. Air slash, Gladion ordered, and Silvely's crest shifted to flying type. Blades of compressed air screamed across the platform. Aura Sphere. Intercept. Lucario's palms blazed blue. The Aura Sphere met the air/dead center, and both attacks detonated in a shockwave that rattled the observation gallery windows. In the smoke, Ash made his move. Extreme speed. Lucario vanished. Not metaphorically, at extreme speed velocity, the movement was faster than the eye could track. Silvely's head whipped left, right, crest cycling frantically as it tried to locate the threat. Lucario appeared behind Silvely and struck, not a finishing blow, but a precision hit to the base of the crest, disrupting the memory drive cycling. Silvely snarled, its type shifting locking up for a critical second. Now. Close combat. The attack was devastating. Lucario unleashed a barrage of strikes, fists, feet, elbows, each one aimed at a different nerve cluster, each one landing with the crack of displaced air. Silvely took the hits, staggering, and Ash saw Gladion's jaw clench. Iron Head. Silvely surged forward through the close combat, its head wreathed in metallic energy, and slammed into Lucario's chest. The impact sent Lucario flying backward, skidding to the edge of the platform. A hit that would have finished most Pokémon. Lucario stood up. His aura blazed. Not the controlled flicker of normal combat, a full corona, deep blue, pulsing with the synchronization between trainer and Pokémon that only came from absolute trust. Ash felt it in his chest, the bond, the resonance, the shared heartbeat that turned two beings into one. Gladion saw it. His eyes widened by a fraction. Silvely, crunch, Aura Storm. It wasn't a move that existed in any official registry. It was something Ash and Lucario had developed during late-night training sessions, building on the principles of Mega Evolution without the stone, pure aura channeled through the bond between trainer and Pokémon, compressed and released in a single devastating wave. The platform lit up blue. Silvely braced, credit to Gladion's training, the Pokémon didn't flinch, and took the blast head-on. When the light faded, Silvely stood for one long, trembling moment. Then its legs buckled, and it went down. Silence. Gladion recalled Silvely. He stood there, pokeball in hand, staring at the scorch marks on the platform. His expression was unreadable. Then he looked at Ash. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Nobody ever expects me," Ash said, returning Lucario. "That's the point." Something shifted in Gladion's posture. Not warmth, that would take longer. But the hostility drained out of his shoulders, replaced by something more complex. Acknowledgement. The recognition of one fighter by another. "Don't make me regret this," Gladion said. He turned and walked toward the stairs. At the bottom, he paused without looking back. Training platforms open from 0600 to 2200. Don't break anything that isn't designed to be broken. He left. Pikachu hopped back onto Ash's shoulder and gave him a look that said, very clearly, "I would have beaten Silvely in half the time." "I know," Ash said. "That's why I didn't use you." Over the next week, Ash learned the shape of his new kingdom. Ether Paradise operated like a small country. It had its own power grid, geothermal, tapping the volcanic vents beneath Alola's ocean floor. Its own water purification. Its own medical facility, staffed by a team of doctors and Pokemon healers. Its own security force, not League Rangers, but ether-trained operatives equipped with specialized containment technology designed for Ultra Beast encounters. Lusamine ran it all. Not from a distance, not through delegation, she was present in a way that surprised Ash. He'd expected a CEO behind a desk. Instead, he found her everywhere. In the conservation labs at dawn, reviewing habitat data. In the tactical operations center at midday, coordinating response protocols. In the research wings at midnight, poring over ultra-space readings with a focus that bordered on terrifying. She worked like the world depended on it. Because, Ash was beginning to understand, she believed it did. Their paths crossed constantly. The facility was large, but Lusamine moved through it like blood through veins, and Ash, restless, unable to stay still, driven to understand every corner of the place he'd committed to, was always in motion too. They'd pass in corridors and exchange quick words. They'd end up at the same briefing and sit on opposite sides of the table, and Ash would catch her watching him during the data presentations, her green eyes sharp with something he couldn't name. On the third night, he couldn't sleep. He wandered the upper levels of the facility, Pikachu dozing on his shoulder, and found himself at the door of the executive office. Light leaked from underneath. He knocked. "It's open." Lusamine's office was less impressive than he'd expected. Large, yes, but cluttered, not with luxury, but with work. Screens displaying ultra-space telemetry covered one wall. A physical map of Alola was spread across a table, marked with pins and handwritten notes. Books, actual paper books, were stacked on every horizontal surface, spines cracked from use. It was the office of a woman who lived in her work. She sat behind her desk, lab coat draped over the back of her chair, reading glasses perched on her nose. The glasses made her look different, less like the untouchable president and more like a person. She looked up when he entered and took off the glasses with the self-conscious speed of someone who didn't like being seen in them. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Haven't been sleeping well for a while. Join the club." She gestured to a chair. "I have tea. Or something stronger, if you need it." "Tea's fine." She poured from a pot on her desk. It was still warm, which meant she'd been here for hours. The tea was good. Some Alolan blend he didn't recognize, floral and slightly sweet. They sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable silence, the silence of two people who didn't feel the need to fill space with noise. Ash looked at the telemetry screens, watching the data streams pulse with readings he was only beginning to understand. "Tell me about the wormholes," he said. Lusamine set down her tea. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." She studied him for a moment, then stood and walked to the telemetry wall. Her fingers moved across the primary screen, pulling up a three-dimensional model of the dimensional barrier, a shimmering membrane rendered in blue light, with red fractures spreading across its surface like cracks in ice. "The barrier between our dimension and ultra-space isn't a wall," she said. "It's more like a living membrane. It flexes. It breathes. And at its core, holding it together, is Necrozma. The prism Pokemon. You've encountered it?" "Briefly. In Alola. Years ago." Lusamine nodded. Necrozma is the light that sustains the barrier. Its energy permeates the membrane, keeping it stable, keeping ultra-space and our world separated. When Necrozma is strong, the barrier is impenetrable. When Necrozma weakens, wormholes. Wormholes. Breaches. Ultra beasts crossing over. The incidents you've been fighting, the one in Lumiose, their symptoms. Necrozma is losing power, and the barrier is failing. She touched the model, and the red fractures pulsed. The question is why? Necrozma has sustained this barrier for millennia. Something is actively draining it. The artificial signatures you mentioned. Extraction technology. Someone has built a device, or multiple devices, capable of siphoning Necrozma's energy directly from ultra-space. Every extraction weakens Necrozma further. Every weakening creates more breaches. It's a cascade failure in slow motion. Ash stood and walked to the model. He traced one of the fracture lines with his finger, and the hologram rippled around his touch. "And you think Aldrich is behind it?" Lusamine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I think Aldrich visited this facility 3 years ago and requested detailed specifications for my ultra-space probe technology. I think I gave them to him because I was desperate for League cooperation and he presented himself as a legitimate research partner. I think I was wrong to trust him. And I think whatever he's built with my technology is killing Necrozma." Her voice was steady, but Ash heard the undercurrent: guilt. The particular guilt of someone who'd created a weapon and watched someone else aim it. "That's why you came to find me," Ash said. "Not just because of the wormholes. Because you feel responsible." Lusamine's eyes met his. In the blue light of the holographic model, they looked almost luminous, green shot through with light, fierce and vulnerable at the same time. "I feel responsible because I am responsible," she said. "I built the tools that are being used to destroy the dimensional barrier. The fact that I was mentally compromised at the time doesn't change that. Reasons aren't excuses. I learned that the hard way." Ash thought about Brock's testimony. About honest words weaponized. About the difference between reasons and excuses, and how the line between them was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. "Tell me about your family," he said. The question surprised her. He could see it, a flicker in her composure, a crack in the mask she wore so effortlessly. She turned away from the model and leaned against the desk. "What do you want to know?" "Glad Ion thinks you're obsessing again. That I'm the new Ultra Beast, something powerful that you fixated on. He's afraid. He has every right to be." Lusamine's voice was soft. "I nearly destroyed them, Ash. Glad Ion and Lily. My children. I was so consumed by ultra space, by Nihilego, by the beauty of it, by the need to possess and control, that I forgot they existed. Lily couldn't touch a Pokemon for years because of what I put her through. Glad Ion ran away from home at 14 because living with me was worse than living on the streets." She paused, and the mask cracked further. Not dramatic, just a loosening around the eyes, a softness that she usually kept locked away. "When I came back, when the toxins cleared and I saw what I'd done, I wanted to die. Not dramatically. Not as a statement. I just looked at my children's faces and couldn't imagine a version of the future where they didn't flinch when I walked into the room." She picked up her tea, held it without drinking. "Rebuilding took years. Lily can touch Pokemon now. Gladion came home. They tolerate me. On good days, they trust me. But they're always watching. Always waiting for me to slip. Are you going to?" Lusamine looked at him. "I don't know. That's the honest answer. I'm not the person I was. But the person I was is still in here." She touched her chest, "and she wants things. Wants to control. Wants to possess. The difference is that now I recognize the wanting, and I choose not to act on it." "That sounds exhausting." A short, surprised laugh. "It is." They sat in the quiet of her office, and the telemetry screens pulsed their slow warning, and Ash felt something shift between them, not dramatic, not electric, but real. The careful removal of a wall, brick by brick. Two people who'd been burned by trust deciding, tentatively, to try again. "You're not what I expected either," Lusamine said. "What did you expect?" "A boy. An extraordinary boy, but still a boy. Someone I'd have to manage, direct, mold into what I needed." She tilted her head, studying him. "Instead I got a man who looks at my failures and doesn't run. That's new. I've seen worse than your failures. I know. I watched. They held each other's gaze for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. Then Pikachu yawned enormously on Ash's shoulder, breaking the tension with the social grace of a Pokémon who was deeply unimpressed by human romantic subtlety. Ash laughed. Lusamine smiled, a real smile, not the calculated one she wore for staff meetings and press conferences. It transformed her face, and he thought, there you are. Get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow I want to show you the Tactical Operations Center. If we're going to figure out what Aldrich is doing, we need a plan. I thought you had a plan. I had a plan to find you. You were the plan. Everything after that, we build together. Ash stood. At the door, he paused. Lusamine. Yes. The glasses. You should wear them more often. They suit you. He left before she could respond, but he heard the surprised breath she took, and something in his chest, something that had been cold and clenched since the tribunal, loosened by a fraction. On the 5th day, the wormhole opened over Akala Island. Ash was in the Tactical Operations Center when the alarm hit, a shrieking tone that cut through the facility like a knife, accompanied by red emergency lighting that turned every white surface to blood. The TOC erupted into controlled chaos, operators at their stations, data streaming across screens, Lusamine's senior staff converging from every corner of the facility with the practiced urgency of people who drilled for this. Lusamine was already there. She stood at the central command table, a holographic display showing Akala Island in real-time satellite overlay, and she was giving orders before Ash reached her side. Breach magnitude, she asked. 6.3 on the Faller scale, an operator reported. That's twice the Lumiose event. We're reading multiple Ultra Beast signatures emerging. Type classification. 2 confirmed Buzzwole. 1 Pheromosa. And something bigger that we can't classify yet, the energy signature doesn't match anything in our database. Lusamine's jaw tightened. She turned to Ash. No explanation needed. Her eyes asked the question. He was already reaching for his belt. Where on Akala? Southern coast. Near the ruins of life. Tapu Lele's territory, Ash said. He looked at Lusamine. How fast can we get there? 7 minutes by high-speed transport. She was already moving, pulling off her lab coat, revealing the slim tactical suit she wore underneath. She'd been prepared. She was always prepared. I'm coming with you. I didn't ask you not to. Something flashed in her eyes, surprise and approval in equal measure. They moved together through the facility, falling into step with a natural synchronization that neither of them commented on. Glad Ion intercepted them at the transport bay, Silvally at his side, already suited up. I'm coming. Glad Ion, Lusamine started. I'm coming, Mother. His tone brokered no argument. Lusamine looked at him, and for a moment, Ash saw not the president and her employee, but a mother looking at her son and seeing the man he'd become. She nodded. The transport screamed across the water at speeds that pushed the edges of its structural tolerance. Ash stood at the forward viewport, watching Akala Island grow from a smudge on the horizon to a looming mass of green and stone. Even from this distance, he could see it, a tear in the sky above the southern coast, shimmering with the sickly iridescence of an ultra-wormhole. It was bigger than the one in Lumiose. Much bigger. Things were falling out of it. They hit the ground running. The transport barely touched down before Ash was out the hatch, Pikachu on his shoulder, the rest of his team released and flanking him in a formation they'd practiced 1,000 times. Charizard took to the air immediately, banking hard toward the wormhole. Greninja materialized beside Ash, silent and lethal. Lucario dropped into a combat stance, aura blazing. Sceptile and Gengar spread wide, covering the flanks. Lusamine deployed beside him, Clefable and Milotic materializing from her Pokeballs with the practiced grace of Pokemon who'd served their trainer through madness and recovery and everything in between. Clefable's expression was serene and terrifying. Milotic moved like water given form and will. Gladion took the right flank with Silvally and Lycanroc, his face set in the grim focus of a trainer who'd been fighting ultra beasts since he was 15. The Buzzwole hit first. Two of them, bulging with grotesque musculature, dropped from the wormhole like falling boulders and cratered the ground near the ruins of life. The ancient stone structure shuddered but held. The Buzzwole flexed, absurdly, performatively, and then charged. Pikachu, Thunderbolt on the left. Greninja, Water Shuriken on the right. Don't let them converge. Pikachu's Thunderbolt split the air, a white gold lance of electricity that struck the left Buzzwole mid-charge and sent it skidding backward, arms crossed in a guard that absorbed most of the damage but stopped its momentum dead. Greninja's Water Shuriken hit the right one in a rapid-fire barrage, each blade finding a joint, a gap in the exoskeleton, a pressure point. Lusamine's Milotic was already in motion, wrapping around the stunned left Buzzwole with Wrap, constricting with crushing force while Clefable's Moonblast detonated against its torso. The Buzzwole roared, a sound like tearing metal, and flexed out of Milotic's grip, but it was hurt, and Ash could see the surprise in its alien eyes. Lucario, cover Milotic. Aura Sphere, rapid fire. The blue spheres hammered the Buzzwole from range, keeping it on the defensive while Milotic recovered and repositioned. Gladion Silvally was engaging the right Buzzwole in close combat, memory drive cycling to fighting type, trading blows with a ferocity that made the ground shake. Then the Pheromosa arrived. It was fast. Impossibly fast. It dropped from the wormhole like a needle and hit the ground running, literally running, its legs a blur, circling the battlefield at speeds that made it hard to track. It struck Sceptile with a low kick that sent the grass-type tumbling, then reversed direction and aimed for Lusamine. Ash didn't think. He moved. Pikachu. Quick attack, intercept. Pikachu was fast enough. Barely. He intercepted the Pheromosa 3 feet from Lusamine, slamming into its midsection with enough force to redirect its trajectory into the stone wall of the ruins. The Pheromosa crumpled the wall, recovered instantly, and turned its attention to Pikachu with the cold focus of a predator recognizing a threat. Pikachu, Iron Tail. Keep it close. Close combat with a Pheromosa was insane. Its speed made it nearly untouchable at range, so the only option was to stay inside its reach, where its long limbs became a liability. Pikachu understood this instinctively. He pressed the attack, staying tight, his iron tail connecting with surgical precision, ribs, joints, the delicate thorax, while dodging counterstrikes by margins measured in millimeters. Lusamine watched, and Ash saw her expression change. Not fear. Recognition. She was seeing what he could do, what he and his Pokémon could do, at full intensity, without holding back, without the cautious restraint that the League demanded. Clefable, Moonblast, assist Pikachu's flank, she ordered, and her voice was steady as stone. The coordinated attack was devastating. Pikachu drove the Pheromosa backward while Clefable's Moonblast cut off its escape routes. When the Pheromosa tried to break left, Gengar materialized from the shadows and hit it with Shadow Ball. When it tried to go right, Lucario was there with Aura Sphere. They corralled it, boxed it, and Pikachu finished it with a Thunderbolt at point-blank range that lit up the ruins like a second sun. The Pheromosa went down. The Buzzwole fell next, Charizard swooping from above with a flare blitz that caught the left one from behind while Silvally's multi-attack shattered the right one's guard. Greninja, moving through the chaos like water through cracks, delivered the final strikes, Water Shuriken to the joints, disabling both Ultra Beasts before they could recover. Then Ash heard it. A sound like the world cracking. The unidentified signature. It emerged from the wormhole slowly, not falling, but descending, as though the wormhole itself was giving birth. It was massive. Crystalline. A body made of faceted surfaces that caught the light and broke it into spectrums, each face reflecting a different color, a different reality. It wasn't a Nihilego. It wasn't a Buzzwole or a Pheromosa. It was a piece of something. A shard. Broken off from something much larger, much older, and falling through the breach because it was too weak to stay where it belonged. It hit the ground, and where it landed, the earth turned to glass, smooth, reflective, and somehow alive, pulsing with a light that felt wrong. Not dangerous. Sad. The light of something dying. Ash approached it carefully. The shard was the size of a car, faceted like a diamond, and it hummed with a frequency that Lucario flinched from, too much aura, too dense, like staring into the sun. "Don't touch it," Lusamine said, but she was moving closer too, her eyes wide. "That's necrozma." "What?" "A piece of necrozma. A fragment. Broken off and falling through the barrier." Her hand hovered over the shard's surface, and Ash saw her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer scientific magnitude of what she was looking at. Necrozma is fragmenting. It's losing cohesion. Whatever is draining it isn't just weakening it, it's breaking it apart. The shard pulsed once, and Ash felt it, not in his body, but in his aura. A cry. Not words, not language. Just pain. The pain of something ancient being torn apart, piece by something it couldn't fight. Pikachu's ears flattened. He pressed against Ash's leg, and Ash could feel the small Pokémon trembling. "We need to contain this," Ash said. "Get it back to Ether Paradise. Study it." Agreed. Lusamine was already on her communicator, calling for containment teams. But her eyes didn't leave the shard, and in their green depths, Ash saw something that scared him more than the Ultra Beasts. Recognition. The look of a woman who understood exactly what she was seeing, because she'd helped create the tools that were causing it. They worked through the afternoon. Containment teams arrived from Ether Paradise, and the shard was secured in a specialized transport pod. Lusamine designed the containment protocols on the spot, her mind working at a speed that left her staff scrambling to keep up. The fallen Ultra Beasts were contained in specialized Pokeballs, Beast Balls, Ether's proprietary design, and tagged for monitoring. Ash walked the perimeter of the impact site while the teams worked. The ground where the shard had landed was still glass, smooth and reflective, catching the Alolan sunlight in ways that made it look like a window into somewhere else. Beneath the glass, he could see the earth, soil and roots and rock, frozen in crystal, preserved like specimens in amber. Greninja walked beside him, silent as always. The ninja Pokémon's red eyes scanned the terrain with predatory alertness, cataloging every shadow, every anomaly. Ash trusted Greninja's instincts more than most surveillance equipment. "There." Ash pointed. At the edge of the impact zone, half buried in the crystallized soil, was a piece of metal. Not natural. Not ancient. Modern alloy, machine smooth, with markings etched into its surface, a serial number and a logo that Ash didn't recognize. He dug it out. It was a component of something, a piece of a larger device, maybe a probe or an antenna. The markings were partially melted, as though the device had been exposed to extreme energy, but enough remained to be readable. He brought it to Lusamine. She looked at it. The color drained from her face, not dramatically, not obviously, but Ash was watching and he saw the blood leave her cheeks and her lips press into a thin line. "You recognize it," he said. "It's an energy extraction probe. One of mine." Her voice was flat. "Controlled. Or rather, one of the designs I provided to Aldrich 3 years ago. Modified, the housing is different, the serial number format isn't Ether's, but the core architecture is unmistakable. I designed that coupling mechanism myself." She handed it back to him, and her hand was steady even though her eyes were not. "He built extraction devices using your probe technology," Ash said. "And he deployed them in ultra space. That's how he's draining necrozma." "Yes. How many?" "I don't know." The probe design was modular. With sufficient resources, he could have built dozens. Hundreds. Lusamine closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the guilt was there, but so was the steel. I need to analyze this component. I can reverse engineer the extraction parameters, figure out how much energy each probe is pulling, how many would be needed to cause the level of degradation we're seeing. And then we find them. And we destroy them. Before Necrozma breaks apart completely and the barrier collapses. They return to Ether Paradise as the sun set. The shard was secured in a containment chamber deep in the research wing. Lusamine disappeared into her lab with the probe component and didn't emerge. Ash showered, changed, and found himself standing on the observation deck, looking out at the ocean. He didn't have time to process it further, because the next morning, the fleet arrived. Ash spotted them from the training platform at dawn, 6 League patrol vessels in formation, cutting through the water toward Ether Paradise with the white wakes of ships that weren't trying to hide. He felt the tension roll through the facility like a wave, the security teams shifting to alert status, the research staff pulling back from exterior positions, the subtle hum of the defense grid powering up. Lusamine met him in the TOC, already in her presidential whites, her expression set in marble. League diplomatic envoy. They requested permission to approach. And you granted it? I granted them a 100-yard exclusion zone and a single transport shuttle for their representative. Her eyes were cool. I'm not in the business of refusing diplomatic contact. I'm also not in the business of letting 6 warships park on my doorstep. The representative arrived within the hour. Ash recognized him immediately. The dark coat. The pale hair. The bearing of a man who walked through the world like it owed him something. Tobias. He stepped off the shuttle onto Ether Paradise's main docking platform and surveyed the facility with the calm appraisal of a general inspecting a fortification he intended to conquer. 2 pokeballs hung from his belt, just 2, visible, though Ash knew there were more. There were always more with Tobias. That was part of his mythology. Lusamine met him at the platform's edge, flanked by Ether security. Ash stood behind her left shoulder. Not hiding, positioning. He wanted Tobias to see him, and he wanted to see Tobias's reaction. Tobias saw him. And smiled. It was a thin smile, the kind that carried weight but no warmth. World champion, Tobias said. Or is it former world champion now? I've lost track. Just Ash is fine. Tobias, Lusamine cut in, her voice carrying the crystalline authority of a woman who ran a sovereign territory and didn't tolerate games on her soil. You're here as a League envoy. Deliver your message. Tobias inclined his head. He produced a sealed document from his coat and offered it to Lusamine with the deliberate ceremony of a man who enjoyed formality. Commissioner Aldrich extends his regards to the Ether Foundation and its esteemed president. He recognizes the Foundation's sovereign status under international maritime law and has no desire to infringe upon it. Tobias paused, letting the diplomatic veneer settle before peeling it away. However, the League has confirmed that Ash Ketchum, a fugitive from lawful League jurisdiction, is currently residing within your facility. The Commissioner requests his immediate surrender and the return of all Pokémon registered in his name. Lusamine didn't touch the document. No. Tobias's smile didn't waver. I was told you'd say that. In which case, the Commissioner authorizes me to inform you that the Ether Foundation's operating licenses within League-affiliated regions, Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, Kalos, and Unova, will be revoked within 72 hours. Your research partnerships with regional Pokémon centers will be terminated. Your conservation habitats in League territory will be placed under government administration. The TOC behind Ash went cold with tension. He could feel the staff listening, 500 people whose lives and work were suddenly on the line because Lusamine had taken in a fugitive. Is that all? Lusamine said. Not quite. Tobias turned his gaze to Ash. I'd like to propose an alternative. A challenge. A formal battle between myself and Mr. Ketchum, conducted under Ether Paradise's jurisdiction, broadcast worldwide. If I win, Ash surrenders himself and his Pokémon voluntarily. If he wins, the League withdraws its demands and acknowledges Aether's sovereignty without condition. That's not the League's usual approach to conflict resolution, Ash said. No. It's mine. The Commissioner prefers politics. I prefer clarity. Tobias's pale eyes locked onto Ash's, and for the first time, the diplomatic mask slipped enough to show what was underneath: hunger. The hunger of a man who'd spent years at the top with no one worth fighting. I've waited a long time for this, Ash. You've gotten stronger since Sinnoh. I want to see how much. Ash felt Pikachu's weight on his shoulder. Felt the static charge building in the small Pokémon's cheeks. Felt his own heartbeat steady and slow, the way it always did when a battle was coming, when the noise fell away and there was nothing left but the fight. He looked at Lusamine. She met his eyes, and something passed between them, not doubt, not permission, but acknowledgement. This was his choice. She wouldn't make it for him. Full 6-on-6. Ash asked. Full 6-on-6. Accepted. The battle platform was extended from Aether Paradise's eastern wing, a massive arena that deployed over the ocean, anchored to the facility by reinforced struts that could withstand tidal forces. The surface was the same energy-absorbing composite as the training platform, but larger, regulation-sized, with a clear zone of open water on all sides. Word spread instantly. Through Aether Paradise, through the League fleet watching from its exclusion zone, through the satellites that carried the broadcast signal to every screen in 6 regions. Within an hour, the entire world was watching. Ash stood on the south end of the platform. The wind off the ocean was strong, salt-laden, pulling at his jacket and his cap. Pikachu sat on his shoulder, ears up, cheeks sparking. Behind him, visible through the transparent walls of the observation gallery, he could see Lusamine standing with her arms crossed, Glad-Ion beside her, Lily on her other side. 500 Aether employees pressed against the glass. Tobias stood on the north end. His coat billowed in the wind. His expression was serene. He held a pokeball in his right hand, and it caught the sunlight like a dark star. No referee. No announcer. Just the ocean and the wind and the weight of everything at stake. Tobias threw first. Darkrai. The ball opened, and the darkness poured out, not light, not energy, but the absence of both. Darkrai materialized from the shadow like a nightmare pulling itself into waking, its cyan eye burning with cold intelligence. The temperature on the platform dropped 5 degrees. The ocean around the arena went still. Ash had fought Darkrai before. In Sinnoh, as a teenager, with Pokémon that weren't ready and instincts that weren't refined. Darkrai had swept his team with Dark Void and Dream Eater, a 1-2 combination that turned sleep into a weapon and made battles feel like drowning. He wasn't a teenager anymore. Pikachu. Pikachu launched from his shoulder. The gallery held its breath. The world held its breath. Darkrai floated on the platform, its single eye tracking Pikachu with predatory focus, and the air between them crackled with the promise of violence. Dark Void, Tobias said. The attack was legendary. A sphere of absolute darkness, expanding outward, designed to drag any Pokémon it touched into deep sleep. In Sinnoh, it had ended battles before they started. Ash had nightmares about it, literally, since that was the attack's purpose. Electroweb. Full spread. Pikachu's cheeks exploded with light. The Electroweb burst outward in a crackling net of electricity that met the Dark Void head-on. The web didn't disperse the darkness, nothing could, but it electrified it, turning the expanding sphere into a lightning-laced trap that forced Darkrai to dodge its own attack as the charged web collapsed around the arena. Darkrai phased through the web, it could move through shadows, after all. But the half-second it spent phasing was a half-second it wasn't attacking, and Pikachu was already moving. Quick attack to Iron Tail. The combination was Pikachu's signature, quick attack to close distance, momentum channeled into Iron Tail at contact. Against most Pokémon, it was devastating. Against Darkrai, it was a statement. Pikachu's glowing tail connected with Darkray's torso. The pitch-black Pokémon recoiled, genuinely staggered, its eye wide with what might have been surprise. Pikachu pressed the attack, not letting up, staying inside Darkray's reach where Dark Void couldn't form properly. "Shadow Ball," Tobias ordered, and his voice had lost some of its serenity. Darkrai formed the Shadow Ball at point-blank range, and Pikachu was too close to dodge, so he didn't. He intercepted it with Electro Ball, the two attacks detonating between the Pokémon in a blast that sent both sliding backward across the platform. They faced each other across 10 feet of scorched composite. Darkray's eye burned. Pikachu's cheeks crackled. The ocean wind howled between them. "Thunderbolt," Ash said. Not shouted, said, calmly, with absolute certainty. The bolt that hit Darkrai wasn't a standard thunderbolt. It was the accumulated charge of a Pikachu who'd been training on high-end equipment for a week, who'd fought Ultra Beasts the day before, who'd spent a decade at the side of the strongest trainer in the world and had absorbed every lesson. The electricity was white, not yellow, not gold, but the pure white of maximum voltage. Darkrai screamed. The sound cut through the wind, through the broadcast, through the walls of the observation gallery. It was the sound of a nightmare being broken. When the light faded, Darkrai was down. The world went silent. Tobias recalled Darkrai. His expression had changed, the serenity was gone, replaced by something raw and real. Not anger. Respect. The respect of a trainer who'd just seen his greatest weapon dismantled by a Pikachu. "Latios," he said, and threw his second ball. The Ian Pokémon materialized in a burst of blue and white, sleek and powerful, its red eyes calm. It had beaten Pikachu in Sinnoh, a mutual knockout that had ended with both Pokémon unconscious. A draw. There would be no draw today. Pikachu, return. Pikachu looked at Ash with surprise. "Trust me." Ash held up a Pokeball. "Greninja." The ball opened, and Greninja appeared on the platform in a cascade of water. The ninja Pokémon landed in a crouch, arms spread, red eyes fixed on Latios with the still intensity of a blade waiting to fall. And then, for the first time since his exile, the bond phenomenon activated. It started as a shimmer. A distortion in the air around Greninja, like heat haze, but blue. Then it intensified, water erupting from nowhere, wrapping around Greninja's body, reshaping it. The frog-like form shifted, elongated, the water crest on its head expanding into a massive shuriken that pulsed with Ash's aura. Greninja's eyes blazed, and through them, Ash saw the battlefield with doubled vision, his own perspective and Greninja's, overlaid, synchronized, unified. Ash Greninja. The form that had shaken Kalos. The form that the League's experts had called unprecedented and deeply concerning and a potential threat to the established battling framework. The form that felt like coming home. "Luster Purge," Tobias commanded, and Latios fired, a beam of psychic light that could core through steel. Cut through it. Greninja moved. The water shuriken on its back detached, expanded, spinning in Greninja's hand like a saw blade the size of a table. It met the Luster Purge head-on, and the water blade split the psychic beam in two, the halves screaming past Greninja on either side, cratering the ocean behind the platform. Greninja was already airborne. Moving with Ash's intention, following the path that existed in both their minds simultaneously. It closed on Latios like a missile, water shuriken leading, and Latios, fast, one of the fastest Pokémon alive, tried to dodge. It wasn't fast enough. The water shuriken struck Latios across the wing joint. The Ian Pokémon spiraled, caught itself, and fired Dragon Pulse at point-blank range. Greninja took it, absorbed it, rolled with it, using the impact force to reposition, and came back with Night Slash, the dark energy cutting across Latios's flank. Back and forth. Two of the fastest Pokémon in the world, trading blows at speeds that the cameras could barely capture. The platform shook with impacts. The ocean below churned. In the observation gallery, Lily had her hands pressed against the glass, her eyes wide. Gladion stood rigid, arms crossed, his knuckles white. Lusamine watched without expression. But her eyes burned. Latios, Dragon Dance into Zen Headbutt. Dragon Dance boosted Latios's speed and power simultaneously, a combination that made an already deadly Pokémon nearly unstoppable. Latios blazed with draconic energy, then launched forward in a Zen Headbutt that distorted the air with psychic force. Ash closed his eyes. In the shared vision of Bond phenomenon, he saw the attack coming as Greninja saw it, a wall of light and force, bearing down at the speed of sound. Water Shuriken. Maximum compression. Greninja poured everything into the shuriken. Not the wide, cutting variant. A single point. Compressed water, spinning so fast it screamed, concentrated into a projectile the size of a fist with the kinetic energy of a freight train. It met Zen Headbutt at the center of the platform. The detonation was visible from space. Later, satellite imagery would show the blast radius, a perfect circle of displaced ocean water around the platform, a mushroom cloud of steam and energy that rose 200 feet. The composite surface cracked, the first time Aether's materials had ever failed under combat stress. When the steam cleared, both Pokémon were standing. Barely. Latios hovered 6 inches off the platform, its wings trembling, its red eyes glazed. Greninja knelt on the cracked surface, water crest diminished, breathing hard. Then Latios's eyes rolled back, and it fell. Tobias caught it in a return beam before it hit the ground. Ash felt the Bond phenomenon flicker. His own legs were shaking, the synchronization took a physical toll, demanding energy from both trainer and Pokémon. He steadied himself, and across the platform, Tobias looked at him with an expression Ash had never seen from the man before. Wonder. The battle continued. Tobias sent out Cresselia, the lunar Pokémon, counterpart to Darkrai, shimmering with psychic radiance. Ash countered with Gengar, whose Shadow Ball and spectral nature gave it a type advantage and a personality perfectly suited to fighting legendary Pokémon. Gengar grinned its unsettling grin and fought like a poltergeist, phasing through attacks, materializing inside Cresselia's guard, landing sucker punches that the lunar Pokémon couldn't predict because even it couldn't read the mind of something that thought in shadows. When Gengar fell to a devastating Aurora Beam, Ash sent out Sceptile. The Grass-type moved through Cresselia's psychic attacks with the fluid agility of a jungle predator, Leaf Blade cutting through Psycho Cut, agility keeping it one step ahead of Cresselia's tracking. Sceptile finished the lunar Pokémon with a Dragon Pulse that Ash had spent months teaching it, a move that broke type conventions and shocked the broadcast commentators into silence. Tobias's 4th Pokémon was Heatran. Ash answered with Greninja again, recovered enough to fight, the Bond phenomenon simmering beneath the surface. The water-type advantage was decisive, but Heatran fought with the grinding endurance of a volcanic Pokémon, taking hits that would have felled lesser creatures and retaliating with Magma Storm. Greninja won, but barely, and Ash recalled it before it collapsed. 5th was Entei. Tobias unleashed the volcano Pokémon with a cold fury that told Ash the veneer had cracked completely. Entei was a force of nature, fire and power and the ancient rage of legendary beasts. Ash met it with Lucario, and the battle was a war of aura versus flame, each hit echoing across the ocean. Lucario's aura storm clashed with Entei's sacred fire in a collision that melted sections of the platform into slag. Lucario won. By inches. By the margin of one perfectly timed extreme speed that caught Entei between breaths. Tobias had 1 Pokémon left. Ash had 3, Pikachu, Charizard, and Sceptile, all battered, all still standing. Tobias looked across the ruined platform. His coat was singed. His hair was disheveled. His pale eyes held something they hadn't held at the start, doubt. 1 left, Ash said. Tobias's hand went to his belt. He held the last Pokeball for a long moment, turning it in his fingers. Then he looked up at Ash, and the doubt resolved into something harder. He threw the ball. Regigigas. The platform groaned. The colossal Pokémon materialized like a mountain growing from the sea, massive, ancient, its gemstone eyes blazing with the slow-burning power of something that had moved continents. The ocean churned beneath it. The air pressure changed. Pikachu's fur stood on end. Ash stared up at the Titan and felt the weight of it, not just physical, but historical. This was a Pokémon that had shaped the world. A god of stone and motion. He made his choice. Pikachu. Pikachu jumped from his shoulder to the platform. The small yellow Pokémon looked up at Regigigas, 50 feet tall, ancient, godlike, and his cheeks sparked, and his jaw set, and he planted his feet on the cracked surface and refused to be afraid. The world watched. Regigigas attacked first, Crush Grip, a massive hand descending like a falling building. Pikachu dodged, Quick Attack Velocity, a yellow blur, and the hand hit the platform hard enough to split it down the middle. The two halves groaned, held together by the reinforced struts, seawater surging up through the crack. Thunder. Not thunderbolt. Thunder. The full force of the sky called down by a Pokémon who'd been channeling electricity for over a decade. The bolt hit Regigigas between the shoulder plates, and the Titan stumbled, 1 foot sliding off the platform edge, catching itself before it plunged into the sea. But slow start was wearing off. Regigigas was warming up, each movement faster, each attack stronger. By its nature, the longer the battle lasted, the more powerful it became. Ash had to end this quickly, and against a Pokémon with the defensive stats of a mountain, quickly was a relative term. Quick attack. Don't stop. Keep hitting the gem clusters. Pikachu became a meteor shower. Hit after hit, striking the gemstones embedded in Regigigas's body, the weak points, the energy conduits, the places where the ancient mechanism was vulnerable. Each hit was a pinprick against a Titan, but Pikachu wasn't throwing pinpricks. He was throwing lightning-wrapped iron tails with the precision of a surgeon and the power of a thunderstorm. Regigigas roared. The sound shook the platform, the facility, the water, the air. It reached for Pikachu with both hands, Crush Grip, full power, and Pikachu dodged, the third grab caught him. Regigigas's fist closed around Pikachu, and the small Pokémon was lost inside that massive grip. The world gasped. In the observation gallery, Lusamine's hand flew to her mouth. Inside the fist, Pikachu glowed. The light built. Ash could feel it, the bond between them, over a decade deep, stronger than any forced evolution or artificial enhancement. The light wasn't a technique. It was everything they were. Every battle. Every loss. Every victory. Every night sleeping under the stars. Every morning waking to face impossible odds. Every moment of a partnership that had outlasted every betrayal, every defeat, every person who'd ever said it wasn't enough. 10 million volts, Ash whispered. Pikachu erupted. The electricity that poured from Regigigas's fist was blinding, pure white, impossibly dense, arcing from every gap in the Titan's grip like a star being born in a closed hand. Regigigas's body convulsed. Its gem eyes flared. Its knees buckled. The fist opened. Pikachu fell, and landed on his feet, smoking, battered, but standing. Regigigas swayed. The colossus that had moved continents, that had pulled legendary golems from the earth, that embodied the raw force of creation, swayed like a tree in a storm. And fell. The impact sent a wave across the ocean that rocked the League fleet a mile away. The platform, what remained of it, sagged under the Titan's weight. Tobias recalled Regigigas in a beam of red light, and the sudden absence of its mass made the platform lurch sickeningly. Silence. The wind. The waves. The distant cry of wind gull. Pikachu stood on the broken platform, breathing hard, his tail drooping, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. He turned and looked at Ash. His dark eyes were clear. Then he collapsed. Ash was across the platform before anyone could speak, scooping Pikachu up, cradling the small body against his chest. Pikachu's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, exhausted, but alive. His paw reached up and touched Ash's face, and the tiny static discharge was like a whisper. "You did it, buddy," Ash said. His voice cracked. "You did it." From the north end of the platform, Tobias walked toward him. The man who'd arrived with diplomatic ultimatums and legendary Pokémon and the weight of the league behind him. He stopped 10 feet away. His face was unreadable. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Ash shifted Pikachu to one arm and took it. Tobias's grip was firm. "You've grown," he said. "More than I thought possible. I had good motivation." Tobias released his hand and looked toward the observation gallery, where Lusamine stood behind the glass. "This isn't over. Aldrich won't accept this. He doesn't honor agreements he didn't personally make." "I know." "Then be ready." Tobias turned to leave, then paused. His pale eyes found Ash's one more time, and something complicated moved behind them. Not warmth. Not friendship. But the recognition of one apex predator by another, the acknowledgement that the world had shifted, and the hierarchy had changed. "When Aldrich comes," Tobias said quietly, "and he will come, it won't be with Pokémon. It'll be with something worse. He's building something, Ketchum. Something that makes legendary Pokémon irrelevant. And when it's ready, trainers like you and me won't matter anymore." He walked to his shuttle. The League fleet withdrew within the hour. The sun was setting by the time Ash found Lusamine. She was on the private observation deck at the top of the main spire, the highest point of Ether Paradise, where the wind was strong and the view encompassed the entire ocean in a 360-degree panorama. She stood at the railing, her white coat catching the golden light, her hair loose and moving in the breeze. He stood beside her. Pikachu was in the medical wing, sleeping, recovering, in the care of Ether's best Pokémon doctors. The rest of his team was resting. The facility was quiet, the adrenaline of the day settling into the exhausted calm that follows crisis. "That was the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen," Lusamine said. She didn't look at him. She watched the sun descend toward the water. "And I've seen things that would break most people's minds." "Are you talking about the battle or the part where my Pikachu punched a god?" She laughed. The sound startled him, not because it was unexpected, but because of how real it was. Not the measured laugh of a president or the polite laugh of a public figure. A real laugh, full-throated and warm, and it transformed her face in ways that the sunset light alone couldn't. "Both," she said. "You're extraordinary, Ash. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say it to flatter you. I say it because I've spent my life around extraordinary things, and most of them disappoint me. You haven't. The day's still young. It's sunset. Then the night's still young." She turned to him. The golden light caught her eyes and turned them from green to something warmer, hazel, almost amber. Her expression was open in a way he'd never seen, no mask, no calculation, no presidential composure. Just a woman standing on top of a fortress she'd built from the wreckage of her own madness, looking at a man who'd been thrown away by everyone he loved. "I'm not a safe bet," she said. "You know that. I'm older than you. I have a history that would scare anyone rational. My own children aren't sure they trust me. I run this place like I'm holding back the tide, because if I stop for even a second, I'm afraid of what the silence will sound like. I'm not looking for safe." "What are you looking for?" Ash thought about it. The question deserved honesty. "Someone who sees me," he said. "Not the champion. Not the fugitive. Not the cautionary tale. Just me. The guy who doesn't know when to stop fighting, who lost every friend he had because he couldn't slow down, who's standing on a floating fortress with a woman he barely knows because the alternative was sitting in a cell while strangers stole his Pokémon." Lusamine's breath caught. Not dramatically. Just a small hitch, barely audible over the wind. "I see you," she said. She touched his face. Her hand was cool against his skin, the touch of someone who spent too much time in air-conditioned labs, and her fingers were steady, and she looked at him with those amber-green eyes and she didn't look away. "Then stop fighting for them," she said. "Fight for something worth keeping." He kissed her. Or she kissed him. It was hard to tell who moved first, maybe neither, maybe both, maybe the wind pushed them together or the sunset pulled them in or some force more fundamental than either decided that two people who'd been lonely long enough had earned this. It was a good kiss. Not desperate. Not performative. Real. The kind of kiss that's built on weeks of quiet conversation and shared meals and the slow recognition that the person across from you understands something about you that you've never been able to explain. When they pulled apart, the sun had touched the water and the sky was on fire and the wind tasted like salt and possibility. "For the record," Lusamine murmured, "I don't usually kiss fugitive trainers on the first sunset. For the record, I don't usually defeat gods and commit to interdimensional warfare before dinner." She laughed again, and this time it was softer, and she leaned her forehead against his, and they stood there while the last light died and the stars came out over their kingdom of glass. Later that night, Ash couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, from the restless energy of too many things happening, too many pieces moving, the post-battle surge that always took hours to fade. He found Lily in the research wing. She was sitting at a workstation in the Ultra Space Archive, a vast digital library containing every piece of data Ether had ever collected on ultra wormholes, ultra beasts, and interdimensional phenomena. Screens surrounded her, scrolling with data. A mug of cold coffee sat untouched beside her keyboard. She looked up when Ash entered, and her expression was wary. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "It's a theme around here." He sat down at the adjacent workstation. Lily watched him for a moment, then returned to her screens. They worked in parallel silence, Lily reviewing Ultra Space Research archives, Ash reading through tactical reports from previous wormhole incidents. "You won," Lily said, after a while. "I did." The whole facility watched. "Everyone's talking about it." She paused. "My mother watched from the gallery." She looked. "I don't know. I haven't seen her look like that before." Ash didn't respond. He let the silence sit. "I need to ask you something," Lily said. She turned to face him, and he saw Lusamine in her, the same directness, the same unflinching gaze, tempered by something softer. "And I need you to be honest. I haven't lied to you." "No. You haven't. That's why I'm asking." She folded her hands in her lap. "Are you going to destroy my mother?" It was the same question she'd asked during their first meeting, rephrased. But this time it carried more weight, because now she'd seen him fight, seen her mother's face as she watched, seen the way two powerful, damaged people were gravitating toward each other like binary stars. "I don't intend to," Ash said. "But I can't promise that." Nobody can promise that. People hurt each other, even when they don't mean to. I've been hurt by people who meant well. Your mother's hurt you without meaning to. All I can tell you is that I'm not here to use her, and I'm not here to be used." Lily's gaze didn't waver. "She sold Aldrich the technology." Ash went still. "I found the records," Lily continued, turning to her screen and pulling up a file. 3 years ago. A technology transfer agreement between Ether Foundation and the League's Advanced Research Division, headed by Commissioner Aldrich. My mother provided full schematics for the Ultra Space Energy Extraction Probe, in exchange for League cooperation on her conservation programs. Ash looked at the screen. The document was there, official letterhead, Lusamine's signature at the bottom, Aldrich's countersignature. Dates, specifications, terms. Everything neat and legal and damning. "She told me," Ash said. Lily blinked. "She told you?" "After the Akala mission. When we found the probe component." She told me she'd provided the designs. And you stayed. She told me the truth. How many people in my life have done that recently? Lily stared at him. Then something shifted in her expression, not trust, not yet, but the willingness to consider trust. The opening of a door that had been locked. There's more, she said. She pulled up another file. I've been going through the older archives. The ones my mother sealed after her recovery. I found communications between her and Aldrich that go back further than the technology transfer. 5 years ago, Aldrich was already asking about ultra-space energy potential. Not for research. For application. She showed him. Emails. Memos. Technical discussions about energy yield, extraction rates, scalability. Aldrich had been planning this for years, not as a sudden scheme, but as a long-term project. Patient. Methodical. And buried in the correspondence, a phrase that made Ash's blood chill. Project Harness, feasibility assessment for large-scale Pokémon behavioral override using extracted ultra-space energy. Behavioral override, Ash said. I don't know what it means yet, Lily said. But if he's using Necrozma's energy to power some kind of control mechanism, he's not just draining Necrozma. He's building a weapon. Ash stood. We need to tell Lusamine. I know. I was going to. But I wanted to show you first. Lily looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the steel beneath her gentleness. Because if my mother already knew about Project Harness, if she knew what Aldrich was building and gave him the tools anyway, then we have a bigger problem than Ultra Beasts. They found Lusamine in her lab. She was still analyzing the probe component from Akala, her reading glasses on, her hair pulled back in a clip. She looked up when they entered together, and Ash saw her register the combination, her daughter and the man she'd kissed hours ago, arriving with matching expressions of grim purpose. What is it? Lily showed her. The files. The correspondence. The phrase. Project Harness. Lusamine's face went blank. Not composed, blank. The difference was important. Composed was a choice. Blank was a system crashing, every process shutting down while the mind behind the face processed something catastrophic. I didn't know, she said. Her voice was distant. The technology transfer, yes. The probe schematics, yes. But behavioral override? Using ultra-space energy to control Pokémon? She looked at the screen, at Aldrich's words, at her own signature at the bottom of the documents that had made it possible. I didn't know. Mother, Lily started. I didn't know. The words cracked like glass. Lusamine's composure shattered, and for a moment Ash saw the woman underneath, not the president, not the recovered obsessive, but a person confronting the full scope of a mistake that might cost the world everything. He told me it was energy research. Clean energy. A way to power regions without fossil fuels or traditional generation. He was so reasonable. So measured. He spoke in percentages and projections and public benefit, and she stopped. Breathed. The lab hummed around them. I wanted to believe him, she said quietly. Because believing him meant my technology was being used for good. That the worst years of my life had produced something worthwhile. She pulled off her glasses and pressed her palm against her eyes. I was a fool. Ash walked to her. He didn't touch her, not now, not in front of Lily, not when the wound was this raw. But he stood close enough that she could feel his presence. You were manipulated, he said. Aldrich is good at that. He manipulated my friends into testifying against me. He manipulated the League into giving him emergency powers. He manipulates systems because that's what he does. You're not a fool for falling for it. You're human. Lusamine lowered her hand. Her eyes were red, but dry. The steel was coming back, the force of will that had rebuilt an empire from the ashes of her own madness. Then let's be human and fight back, she said. Lily, I need you to map every communication Aldrich and I ever exchanged. Find every reference to Project Harness, every hint of what he was building. I want to know the scale. Already started, Lily said. Ash. Lusamine looked at him, and the vulnerability was still there, but now it was armored. Tobias said Aldrich is building something that makes trainers irrelevant. If Project Harness is a Pokemon override system powered by Necrozma's stolen energy, then we're not just facing an Ultra Beast crisis. We're facing the end of free training. Then we don't let him finish it. It may already be finished. Or close to it. The rate of extraction we're seeing, the fragmentation of Necrozma, suggests the project is in its final stages. She turned to the telemetry screens, pulling up the dimensional barrier model. The red fractures had grown since the last time Ash had seen it, wider, deeper, spreading like a web. We may have weeks. Maybe less. Then we need to find the extraction facility. Find Necrozma. Stop whatever Aldrich's doing before it's too late. Lusamine nodded. I can trace the extraction signatures. The probe component we recovered gives us a frequency baseline. If I can triangulate from multiple wormhole events, I can pinpoint the facility's location in ultra space. Do it. She was already moving. Hands on keyboards, screens changing, data flowing. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the ferocious focus that made her who she was, the woman who bent the world to her will, for better or worse. Lily caught Ash's eye as he turned to leave. She gave him a small nod, not warm, not cold. The nod of someone who'd seen something that shifted her calculations. Thank you, she said. For not pretending she's perfect. Nobody's perfect, Ash said. I just need her to be honest. She is. That's what scares me. Ash returned to the observation deck. The night sky over Ether Paradise was vast and dark, the stars undimmed by city light, the Milky Way a river of ancient fire from horizon to horizon. He stood at the railing and breathed. In the span of a single day, he'd faced Gladian's challenge, fought off an Ultra Beast invasion, discovered evidence of a weapon that could enslave every Pokemon on the planet, defeated Tobias and 6 legendary Pokemon in a battle broadcast worldwide, kissed a woman who might be the most complicated person he'd ever met, and learned that the dimensional barrier between worlds was weeks from collapse. A month ago, he'd been the world champion. The hero. The kid from Pallet Town who'd climbed to the top and proven that passion and heart could beat anything. Now he was standing on a floating fortress with a team of brilliant, damaged, extraordinary people, preparing to fight a war that nobody else knew was coming. He thought about his friends. Not with anger, the anger had burned down to something cooler, something that sat in his chest like an ember rather than a flame. He thought about Brock's steady voice. Misty's shaking hands. Clement's limp. Serena's tears. Dawn, who tried to defend him and been silenced. He thought about Lusamine's face when she said I didn't know. The way her voice cracked. The way she pulled herself back together, not by pretending the crack hadn't happened, but by choosing to be strong in spite of it. He thought about Tobias's warning, it won't be with Pokemon. It'll be with something worse. And he thought about Pikachu, sleeping in the medical wing, wrapped in warmth and care, alive and fierce and unbroken after facing a god. The ocean moved below him. The stars burned above. The kingdom of glass hummed with energy and purpose around him, and somewhere in ultra space, an ancient Pokemon of light was dying, and somewhere in the world, a man in a commissioner's uniform was building a cage big enough for every trainer alive. The wind shifted. From the south, warm, carrying the scent of tropical flowers and volcanic earth. Alola's wind. His new home's wind. A massive ultra wormhole tore open above Ether Paradise. The alarms hit like a physical force, every light in the facility switching to red, every screen flashing emergency protocols, every speaker blaring the breach warning that Ash had heard only once before. But this was different. The sound was louder. The lights were brighter. The urgency was real in a way that the Akala event hadn't been. He looked up. The wormhole was enormous. Not the contained breach they'd seen at Akala, this was a wound in the sky, a ragged tear in reality itself, edges crackling with energy that shifted through colors the human eye shouldn't have been able to see. It was directly above the facility. Directly above them. And things were coming through. Not one or two. Dozens. Ultra beasts of every classification, Nihilego drifting like poisonous jellyfish, Buzzwole dropping like meteors, Kartana slicing through the air like living paper, Celesteela rising from the breach like rockets launching in reverse. A swarm. An army. More ultra beasts than had ever been recorded in a single event. Lusamine's voice cut through the chaos on the facility's comm system, sharp and commanding, all personnel to battle stations. Defense grid to maximum. This is not a drill. Ash gripped the railing. Below him, Aether Paradise exploded into motion, security teams deploying, containment units launching, the electromagnetic barrier flickering to life around the facility's perimeter in a dome of crackling energy that caught the first wave of Nihilego and held them, barely. Gladion burst through the observation deck door, Silvally at his side, already in battle mode. That's the biggest breach I've ever seen. It's the biggest breach anyone's ever seen. Ash turned from the railing. His eyes were clear. His jaw was set. The fear was there, he'd be a fool not to be afraid, but it sat beneath the surface, managed, contained, fuel for the fire rather than a weight. He reached for his belt. Get Pikachu from medical, he told Gladion. Tell the doctors he'll want to fight. They should let him. And you? Ash looked up at the wormhole, at the tear in reality, at the army pouring through, at the dying light of an ancient Pokémon bleeding through the breach like a wound that wouldn't close. I'm going to work. The facility shuddered as the first Ultra Beast hit the barrier. Then another. Then 10 more. Somewhere below, Lusamine's voice was coordinating the defense, steady and fierce and unbreakable. Somewhere above, the sky was falling. And Ash Ketchum stepped forward to hold it up. Chapter 3, Crown of Light and Shadow. The first Nihilego hit the barrier and burst into luminescent fragments that rained down on Aether Paradise like toxic snow. The second one pushed through a weak point in the electromagnetic field and drifted toward the conservation dome, its translucent bell pulsing with the hypnotic light that had once enslaved Lusamine's mind. The third, fourth, and fifth came together, a cluster, coordinated, pressing against the barrier with a combined weight that made the generators scream. Ash didn't wait for the elevator. He vaulted the observation deck railing, grabbed a maintenance ladder on the outer hull, and slid 12 stories to the main combat platform with Charizard's Pokeball already in his hand. The wind tore at him, not natural wind, but the displacement pressure of the wormhole above, a vortex that pulled the air upward like the sky was breathing in. He hit the platform running. Charizard materialized mid-stride, already airborne, wings spread to catch the unnatural thermals. Ash didn't mount, not yet. He needed eyes on the ground first. Greninja. Sceptile. Gengar. Go. 3 balls opened. 3 Pokémon hit the platform in combat stances. They didn't need instructions, they'd trained for this, fought for this, bled for this. Greninja launched toward the Nihilego that had breached the barrier, water shuriken already spinning. Sceptile scaled the nearest spire and began picking off Kartana from an elevated position, Leaf Blade cutting the paper-thin Ultra Beasts out of the air before they could slice through the facility's hull. Gengar sank into the shadows and began hunting. The facility's defense teams were deploying across every level. Ash could see them through the transparent walls, white uniformed operatives releasing their Pokémon, taking positions at reinforced stations, working with the methodical efficiency that Lusamine had drilled into them. But they were overwhelmed. The sheer volume of Ultra Beasts pouring through the wormhole was beyond anything the defense protocols had anticipated. Lusamine's voice came through the facility-wide comm, and even in crisis, it carried the particular authority of a woman who refused to let the world fall apart on her watch. All defense teams, priority targets are the Celesteela. If they detonate near the facility's power core, we lose the barrier entirely. Conservation staff, initiate emergency containment on all habitats. I want every Pokémon in those domes protected. Medical teams, prepare for casualties. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Ash pulled his comm unit from his pocket. Lusamine had issued him one on his second day, integrated into Ether's encrypted network. Lusamine, I need Lucario released from rest. And Pikachu. Pikachu's still in medical recovery, he'll want to fight. Trust me. A pause. Then, sending someone to medical now. Lucario's ball is in your quarters, I'll have it brought to you. Thank you. Don't thank me. Win. The comm clicked off. Above him, the wormhole pulsed, and a fresh wave of ultra beasts descended. Ash mounted Charizard and took to the air. From above, the scale of the assault was staggering. The electromagnetic barrier flickered around Ether Paradise like a dying heartbeat, holding against most of the swarm but failing at stress points where multiple ultra beasts pressed simultaneously. Nihilego drifted in clusters, their toxic tentacles probing for gaps. Buzzwole dropped from the breach like living ordnance, cratering whatever they landed on. Kartana sliced through the air in formation, dozens of them, bladed and lethal, cutting into the facility's communication arrays and antenna clusters. And the Celesteela, 4 of them, massive, rising from the wormhole like rockets in reverse, their bodies glowing with the stored energy of 1,000 suns. If even one of them detonated near the power core, the barrier would collapse, and every ultra beast in the sky would pour into Ether Paradise like water through a broken dam. Charizard, the Celesteela. We take them first. Charizard banked hard, wings cutting through the displaced air, and dove toward the nearest Celesteela with a flare blitz that ignited his entire body. The impact shook the sky. The Celesteela recoiled, its bamboo-like arms swinging wildly, but Charizard was already past it, circling for another pass. Dragon Claw, left thruster. Charizard's claws, wreathed in draconic energy, tore through the Celesteela's left propulsion unit. The Ultra Beast listed, its flight path destabilizing, and began to spiral away from the facility. 1 down. 3 to go. Gladion appeared on Charizard's left, mounted on a Noivern that Ash hadn't seen before, a sleek, dark-winged specimen that moved through the chaotic air with predatory grace. Silvally rode on Noivern's back behind Gladion, its crest cycling through types as it assessed threats. I'll take the 2 on the eastern approach. Gladion shouted over the wind. You get the big one. The big one. Ash looked up. The 4th Celesteela was twice the size of the others, an alpha, maybe, or something older, something that had been feeding on ultra space energy for centuries. It hung above the facility like a sword, and its body was building toward ignition. The glow intensified with each passing second. Charizard. Blast Burn. It was a move of last resort, maximum power, maximum risk, leaving Charizard temporarily unable to attack. But they didn't have time for a prolonged engagement. The Celesteela was seconds from detonation. Charizard reared back, drew in a breath that made the air around them shimmer with heat, and unleashed hell. The blast burn struck the Alpha Celesteela dead center. The explosion was enormous, a sphere of fire that expanded outward in every direction, consuming the Ultra Beast in a conflagration that turned the night sky orange. The shockwave hit Ash and Charizard like a wall, sending them tumbling through the air. Ash gripped Charizard's neck, teeth clenched, the heat washing over them both. When the fire cleared, the Celesteela was falling, a burning wreck, trailing smoke and shattered bamboo, plunging into the ocean a quarter mile from the facility. The impact sent a geyser of steam into the air. Charizard hovered, panting, the recharge period from blast burn leaving him momentarily sluggish. Ash patted his neck. Good. Rest for 30 seconds, then we go back in. Below, the ground battle raged. Ash could see his Pokémon through the chaos, Greninja moving through the Nihilego like water through glass, striking with precision that kept the toxic creatures from reaching the conservation domes. Sceptile on his perch, a green and red blur of leaf blades, his twig still firmly clamped between his teeth despite the apocalyptic circumstances. Jengar, invisible except for the flashes of Shadow Ball that erupted from unexpected angles, taking down Buzzwole with the gleeful enthusiasm of a Pokémon who genuinely enjoyed combat. An Ether security officer sprinted across the main platform below, a Pokeball in her outstretched hand. She looked up, spotted Ash on Charizard, and threw. Ash caught Lucario's ball one-handed. "Thanks." The officer gave a thumbs up and dove behind a barricade as a Kartana whizzed past her head. Ash released Lucario. The Aura Pokémon materialized on Charizard's back, balanced perfectly, his paws already blazing with blue energy. He looked at the swarm around them and his lip curled, the particular expression of a Pokémon who found the entire situation personally offensive. Aura Sphere Barrage. Clear the path to the wormhole. Lucario leaped from Charizard's back, free-falling through the swarm, launching aura spheres in every direction, each one finding a target, each one detonating with pinpoint accuracy. Nihilego burst apart. Kartana spun away. A Buzzwole took an aura sphere to the face and dropped out of the sky like a stone. Lucario landed on the facility's upper spire, still firing, a one-Pokémon anti-aircraft battery. Ash. The voice cut through the battle noise, small, fierce, unmistakable. Ash looked down. Pikachu stood on the main platform, bandages still wrapped around his midsection from the Regigigas fight, his cheeks sparking with the barely contained fury of a Pokémon who'd been told to rest while his trainer fought for his life. Ash grinned. He couldn't help it. Even in the middle of an invasion, even with the sky tearing itself apart above them, the sight of that stubborn yellow face looking up at him with those determined dark eyes made something in his chest feel right. "Get up here, buddy." Pikachu ran. Up the side of the spire, claws finding purchase on the composite surface, static charge keeping him adhered like a magnet, and launched himself from the top directly onto Ash's shoulder. The impact nearly knocked Ash off Charizard, but he caught himself and Pikachu was there, warm and electric and furious and alive. "Missed you too," Ash said. "Let's go to work." The battle lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of constant combat, constant movement, constant decision-making at a pace that would have broken most trainers in the first 20 minutes. Ash coordinated from the air and the ground, switching between Charizard for aerial engagements and the platform for close-quarters defense, his team rotating through engagements with the practiced fluidity of Pokémon who'd fought in every terrain on every continent. Lusamine commanded from the TOC, her voice a constant presence on the calm, precise, adapting to each new development with a strategic mind that matched Ash's tactical instincts. When a cluster of Nihilego breached the eastern barrier, she redirected power from the western generators to reinforce the gap. When the Buzzwole attacked in waves, she coordinated the defense teams into overlapping fields of fire that turned each wave into a kill box. When a Kartana swarm threatened the communication array, Ether's link to the outside world, she ordered Gladion to intercept and held her breath until the array was clear. They worked together without discussion, without explanation. He attacked, she defended. He pushed forward, she held the line. Two people who'd known each other for weeks fighting like they'd been partners for years, their rhythms aligned in a way that went beyond strategy into something instinctive. By the second hour, the swarm was thinning. The wormhole above was still open, pulsing, massive, wrong, but fewer ultra beasts were emerging. Whether the source was running dry or something else was happening on the other side, Ash couldn't tell. But the pressure was easing, and the facility was holding. Then the ships appeared on the southern horizon. Not League ships. Not the patrol fleet that had carried Tobias. These were different, larger, darker, unmarked. 7 vessels in tight formation, moving fast, bristling with equipment that Ash didn't recognize. Antenna arrays and dish-shaped projectors mounted on every hull, all pointed toward Ether Paradise. "Lusamine, are you seeing this?" I see them. Her voice was tight. Those aren't League standard vessels. The equipment on their decks, that's extraction technology. The same type we found on the probe component. Aldrich. He's moving. Whatever Project Harness is, he's deploying it now, while we're distracted by the breach. As if in response, the lead vessel's main projector activated. A beam of light, not white, not natural, but the prismatic, fractured light of stolen ultra-space energy, lanced from the ship directly into the wormhole above Ether Paradise. The wormhole reacted instantly, expanding, its edges tearing wider, and a fresh surge of ultra beasts poured through. He's feeding the breach, Ash realized. He's using the extraction energy to widen it. He's trying to overwhelm us. If the barrier falls and the facility is overrun, there's nothing stopping him from taking everything we have. Our research. Our data. Us. Lusamine's voice hardened. I'm activating the secondary defense grid. It'll drain our reserves, but it should hold against the expanded breach. Do it. I'll handle the ships. Ash, those vessels are armed, I'll handle them. He didn't wait for her response. Charizard surged toward the fleet, Pikachu clinging to Ash's shoulder, and behind them, Lucario and Greninja followed, Lucario leaping between debris and structural elements with impossible agility, Greninja running across the surface of the ocean itself, water chakra keeping it atop the waves. The lead vessel opened fire. Not Pokémon, weapons. Energy projectors that spat bolts of prismatic light, the same stolen necrozma energy that powered their extraction beams. The bolts screamed past Charizard as the fire-type dodged and weaved, each near-miss leaving afterimages of rainbow light burned into Ash's retinas. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Target the projector array. Pikachu leaped from Ash's shoulder, free-falling toward the lead vessel, and unleashed a thunderbolt that struck the main projector dish dead-on. The dish exploded in a shower of sparks and prismatic fragments, and the beam feeding the wormhole stuttered and died. The wormhole contracted by a fraction, still massive, still open, but no longer expanding. 1 down. 6 to go. Greninja hit the second vessel from below, launching from the ocean surface, clearing the ship's railing, and engaging the crew's security Pokémon with a speed that left them staggering. Water Shuriken disabled the projector array while the ninja Pokémon dismantled the deck defenses with clinical efficiency. Lucario reached the third vessel by leaping between the ships, Aura Sphere clearing his path, and tore through the extraction equipment with Metal Claw. The metal screamed as it came apart, and the beam from the third vessel died. Ash and Charizard swept the remaining 4, and he didn't hold back. Flamethrower melted projector dishes into slag. Dragon Claw shredded antenna arrays. Pikachu, returned to Ash's shoulder, picked off individual system components with targeted thunderbolts of surgical precision. In 7 minutes, all 7 vessels were dark, their extraction technology destroyed, their beams silenced, their crews retreating below decks as their security Pokémon were systematically outmatched by a team that had just spent 3 hours fighting an army of Ultra Beasts and was frankly annoyed at the interruption. But the wormhole didn't close. It hung there, diminished but persistent, pulsing with the sickly light of a wound that wouldn't heal. And through it, Ash could see something, a glow, deep inside the breach, like a star dying behind a curtain. Fading. Flickering. Necrozma. He returned to the facility. The Ultra Beasts that remained were being mopped up by Gladion's teams and the Ether security forces. The breach had stopped producing new ones, but the stragglers were dangerous and required careful containment. Ash landed on the main platform and recalled his team except for Pikachu, who refused to go in his ball and communicated this by sparking threateningly every time Ash reached for it. Fine. You stay out. Pikachu settled on his shoulder with a satisfied chirp. Lusamine met him in the TOC. She looked like she'd been through a war, because she had. Her hair was disheveled, her tactical suit scuffed, her eyes ringed with the shadows of sustained adrenaline and focus. But she was upright, and her voice was steady, and when she looked at Ash, the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. "The breach is stabilizing but not closing," she reported, pulling up the telemetry. "The wormhole is being held open by a sustained energy drain from the other side. Even with the fleet's projectors destroyed, whatever's in ultra space is still pulling power from Necrozma. The extraction facility. It has to be Aldrich's primary installation, the one that's been draining Necrozma for months. The fleet was auxiliary. The real operation is on the other side of that breach." She zoomed the display into the wormhole itself, and the readings confirmed what Ash's gut already knew. Necrozma's output has dropped to 12% of baseline. If it reaches zero, the barrier collapses worldwide. Every wormhole site on the planet opens permanently. Ash looked at the holographic map. Red markers everywhere, the same ones Lusamine had shown him on the beach, but more now. Many more. Spreading across every region like a disease. How long? At current drain rates? 48 hours. Maybe less. Then I go in. Lusamine looked at him. Not with surprise, she'd known this was coming. He could see it in her face, the calculation already done, the objections weighed and discarded, the acceptance of what had to happen sitting heavy in her expression. "I'm coming with you," she said. "Lusamine, I know ultra space. I've been there. I survived it. And the extraction technology is mine, I'll know how to disable it faster than anyone else." She stepped closer. Her voice dropped, pitched for him alone. "And I am not going to stand in this room and watch you walk into another dimension alone. Not after everything. Don't ask me to." Ash looked at her. At the steel and the vulnerability and the absolute refusal to be left behind. He thought about all the people who'd stood beside him over the years and then walked away. All the people who'd said they believed in him and then sat in a tribunal chamber and called him dangerous. This woman wasn't walking away. She was walking in. "Okay," he said. "Together." Glad Ion appeared in the TOC doorway, Silverly at his side, both of them battered and bloodied from the ground defense. He took one look at Ash and Lusamine's faces and his jaw clenched. "You're going into ultra space." "Yes," Lusamine said. You should stay here and hold this facility." Lusamine's voice was firm but gentle, a mother's voice, layered beneath the president's. "If the barrier starts to fail while we're inside, Ether Paradise will be the last line of defense for Alola. You and Lily need to be here." Gladion's fists clenched at his sides. Silverly pressed against his leg, sensing his turmoil, its crest cycling through agitated colors. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked at Ash. "Bring her back." "I will. I'm serious, Ketchum. You bring her back, or I come in there and drag both of you out." "Understood." Gladion nodded once, sharp, decisive, and left. At the door, he paused. "Mother." Lusamine turned. "Be careful." He said it like the words cost him something. Like they'd been locked away for years and he was prying them loose with bloody fingers. "Please." Lusamine's composure cracked. Just for a second. Her eyes glistened, and she pressed her lips together, and she nodded. Gladion disappeared down the corridor, and the moment passed, and they were back to war. They prepared in 30 minutes. Lusamine assembled a compact toolkit, devices for analyzing and disabling extraction technology, a portable barrier generator, emergency medical supplies. Ash checked his team. All 6 Pokémon were battered from the defense but willing, more than willing. When he briefed them on what was coming, Charizard snorted flame, Greninja nodded, Lucario's aura blazed, Sceptile picked a fresh twig, Gengar cackled, and Pikachu sparked. Lily caught them at the launch bay. She carried a device, a small, complex piece of equipment that looked like a compass crossed with a satellite phone. "Ultra Space Navigator," she said, pressing it into Ash's hands. "I modified it from Mother's old designs. It'll track the extraction energy signatures and guide you to the facility. The readings update in real time. Thank you, Lily. Also. She hesitated. Then she reached out and took Lusamine's hand. Mother and daughter stood there for a heartbeat, connected by touch and the weight of years, and Lily said, "Come home." Lusamine squeezed her daughter's hand. "I will. I promise. You've broken promises before. I know. I won't break this one." They boarded the transport, a specialized vehicle designed for ultra-space incursions, shielded against dimensional interference, equipped with Lusamine's barrier technology. The launch bay doors opened, revealing the wormhole above, still pulsing, still bleeding light, still a wound in the world that needed closing. Lusamine took the controls. Ash stood behind her, one hand on the back of her seat, Pikachu on his shoulder. Through the viewport, the wormhole grew larger as they ascended, filling the sky, filling the world, filling everything with its fractured, prismatic, dying light. "Ready?" Lusamine asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I. Let's go." The transport entered the wormhole, and reality came apart. Ultra space was wrong. Not dangerous, wrong. The way a note played slightly flat is wrong, the way a face in a dream is wrong. Everything looked almost right but wasn't. The sky was dark but not black, it was the deep violet of a bruise, and it moved, shifting and breathing like a living thing. The ground, if it could be called ground, was crystalline, translucent, showing layers beneath layers beneath layers, each one reflecting a different version of the landscape above. The light came from everywhere and nowhere, sourceless, dimensionless, casting shadows that pointed in impossible directions. Ash felt it in his chest, a pressure, not physical but existential, the weight of being somewhere his body wasn't designed to exist. Pikachu's fur stood on end, and the small Pokémon pressed closer to Ash's neck. Lusamine piloted the transport with the grim familiarity of someone revisiting a place they'd hoped never to see again. Her hands were steady on the controls, but Ash could see the tension in her shoulders, the memory of what this place had done to her, the toxins and the madness and the beauty that had nearly swallowed her whole. "Stay focused," she said, as much to herself as to him. Ultra space preys on the mind. It finds your fears, your regrets, your weaknesses, and it amplifies them. You'll see things that aren't real. Hear things. Feel things. The key is to remember what's real and hold on to it. What's real? She glanced at him over her shoulder. You tell me. The navigator beeped. Lily's device was working, the extraction signatures were clear, a pulsing trail of energy that cut through ultra-space like a road of stolen light. Lusamine followed it, the transport weaving between floating crystalline formations that drifted through the violet sky like glaciers in a purple ocean. 20 minutes in, the hallucinations started. They came without warning. One moment Ash was watching the alien landscape scroll past the viewport, and the next he was standing in the tribunal chamber. Not physically, he was still in the transport, still holding the back of Lusamine's seat, but the chamber was overlaid on his vision like a transparency, and the voices were so clear they might have been real. He's a natural disaster with a face. Serena's voice. Her face, floating in the violet sky, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I waited for you. I would have followed you anywhere. Strength without restraint isn't heroism. Friends tell each other the truth, even when it hurts. The voices layered, overlapped, built into a chorus of everything he'd been trying not to think about for weeks. Every word from the tribunal, every testimony, every friend's voice twisted into a weapon and aimed at the softest parts of him. He closed his eyes. Breathed. Felt Pikachu's heartbeat against his neck, fast, steady, real. That's real, he told himself. Pikachu is real. This transport is real. Lusamine is real. The fight is real. Everything else is noise. When he opened his eyes, the voices were gone. Lusamine was gripping the controls so hard her knuckles were white. She stared straight ahead, and Ash could see something in her expression, the ghost of whatever ultra space was showing her. Her children's faces. The nihilego. The madness. He put his hand on her shoulder. She flinched. Then she exhaled, a long, shaking breath, and the tension in her shoulders loosened by a fraction. "I'm real," he said. "Everything else is a lie. I'm real, and I'm here." She reached up and covered his hand with hers. Her fingers were cold. "I know," she whispered. "I know." They flew on. The extraction facility appeared on the horizon like a tumor growing from the crystal landscape. It was massive. A structure of metal and stolen light, bolted into the crystalline ground with anchor points that had shattered the translucent surface in radiating cracks. Towers rose from its center, antenna arrays, energy collectors, broadcasting dishes, all pointed inward, toward the heart of the facility, where a light burned so bright it hurt to look at. Necrozma. The prism Pokémon was chained. Not with physical restraints, with energy. Beams of extraction technology pierced Necrozma's crystalline body from every angle, each one drawing light from the ancient Pokémon like needles drawing blood. The light that emerged was fractured, broken into spectrums, channeled through the facility's systems and transmitted through a massive relay at the top of the central tower, broadcast outward, through ultra-space, through the wormholes, to whatever receiving stations Aldrich had built in the real world. Necrozma's body was cracked. Pieces of it had broken away, shards, like the one they'd found at Akala, drifting in the violet sky around the facility like fragments of a shattered star. What remained was diminished, flickering, the light inside guttering like a candle in a hurricane. Ash stared at it and felt something he hadn't felt during the tribunal, during the flight, during the invasion. He felt rage. Not the hot, impulsive rage of his younger years. Something colder. Harder. The rage of a man looking at a god in chains and understanding exactly who put them there and why. "Can you disable the extraction beams?" he asked Lusamine. She was already analyzing the facility's systems on her portable scanner, her eyes flicking across data streams with the speed of a mind designed for exactly this kind of work. "The beams are generated by independent nodes, each tower is a separate extraction unit. I need to physically access the control hubs and shut them down one by one. There are," she counted, 8 primary nodes. "I can disable each one in about 3 minutes if I have uninterrupted access." 24 minutes. 24 minutes in a hostile facility. "Yes. Then I keep you covered while you work." Lusamine looked at him. Then she looked at the facility, at the chained god, at the scope of what they were about to attempt. And she nodded. They landed the transport behind a crystalline outcrop half a mile from the facility's perimeter. Ash released his full team. 6 Pokémon materialized in the alien landscape, and every one of them looked at the facility with the same expression, focused, fierce, ready. Lusamine released her own team. Clefable. Milotic. Beware. Lopunny. Mismagius. 5 Pokémon who'd served her through madness and redemption, who knew their trainer's strength and matched it. "I'll take the northern approach," Lusamine said, pulling up a schematic of the facility she'd extrapolated from the scanner data. "The first 4 nodes are clustered on the north side. You clear the path, I disable them, we move to the south side and repeat." "What about defenses?" "The facility has automated security, energy projectors, probably some Ultra Beast hybrids based on the biosignatures I'm reading." And, she paused. Looked at the scanner again. "There's a human life sign in the central tower. Aldrich. Or someone he left in charge." Ash looked at the facility. The stolen light pulsed through its structure like blood through veins, and Necrozma's diminished glow cast everything in the fractured colors of a dying prism. "Greninja, Lucario, you're with me and Lusamine on the northern approach. Charizard, Sceptile, Gengar, perimeter. Keep anything from flanking us." Charizard rumbled acknowledgement and took to the violet sky. Septile disappeared into the crystal formations with a predator's silence. Jengar grinned and sank into the shadows, which in ultra-space were deeper and stranger than anything in the real world. Lusamine. Let's move. They covered the half-mile at a run. The facility's outer defenses activated when they crossed the perimeter, energy turrets mounted on the anchor points, spitting bolts of Necrozma's stolen light. Lucario's aura sphere took out the first two. Greninja's water shuriken disabled the third. Lusamine's clefable raised a reflect barrier that deflected 3 simultaneous shots, the energy ricocheting off the psychic shield and detonating harmlessly against the crystal landscape. Then the hybrids came. They emerged from ports in the facility's base, creatures that were almost ultra beasts but not quite. Modified. Augmented. Nihilego with mechanical implants that made their tentacles rigid and blade-like. Buzzwole with armor plating welded to their exoskeletons. Things that should not have existed, the fusion of alien biology and human engineering, created for no purpose except violence. Ash felt his stomach turn. Whatever Aldrich was, whatever he believed he was building, this was obscenity. Living creatures twisted into weapons. Greninja, take the left flank. Water shuriken, rapid fire, target the mechanical implants. They're the weak points. Greninja moved like poetry written in violence, fluid, silent, devastating. Each water shuriken found a mechanical joint, a welded seam, a point where technology met biology. The hybrid staggered as their augmentations failed, reverting to confused, disoriented ultra beasts that milled in place rather than attacking. Lucario handled the right flank with aura sphere and close combat, his movements precise and fierce. Lusamine's Beware, an enormous pink Pokémon with the deceptive appearance of a stuffed animal and the actual strength to bend steel, waded into the center and began dismantling hybrids with its bare paws, pulling augmentations off like a mechanic stripping parts. First node. Lusamine shouted, running for the nearest tower. Ash covered her, Pikachu on his shoulder, picking off turrets and hybrids with thunderbolts that arced through ultra-space's strange atmosphere with enhanced conductivity. Lusamine reached the node, a control panel at the tower's base, sealed behind a reinforced hatch. She pulled tools from her kit, bypassed the lock in 15 seconds, and dove into the system with the focused intensity of a woman disabling her own creation. "This is my architecture," she muttered, hands flying over the controls. "Modified, but mine. The extraction frequency is tuned to Necrozma's specific light wavelength. I designed this calibration." Damn him for being thorough. "Can you shut it down?" "Already done." She pulled a component from the panel, a crystal resonator that pulsed with stolen light, and crushed it in her fist. The tower's extraction beam flickered and died. In the distance, Necrozma's glow brightened by a fraction. 1 down. 7 to go. They moved to the second node. Then the third. Each one guarded by more hybrids, more turrets, more obstacles. Each one disabled by Lusamine's hands in under 3 minutes, her knowledge of her own technology turning Aldrich's fortress against itself. By the fourth node, the resistance had intensified. The hybrids were larger, more heavily augmented, and they fought with a coordination that suggested central control, someone or something directing them from the main tower. A hybrid Nihilego, twice normal size, its bell studded with energy projectors, launched a concentrated beam at Lusamine. Ash didn't think. He moved between her and the blast, and Pikachu's thunderbolt intercepted it in midair. The energy clashed through them both backward, and Ash hit the crystal ground hard, the impact jarring through his spine. Lusamine was at his side in a second. "Ash, I'm fine. Keep working." He stood, ignoring the pain in his back. Pikachu was already back on his feet, cheeks blazing, ready for more. She looked at him for a moment of raw, unguarded concern, and then turned back to the fourth node and tore into it. 4 down. 4 to go. The southern approach was worse. The facility's defenses on this side were heavier, more turrets, more hybrids, and something new, energy barriers that cut off corridors and access routes, forcing them into choke points where the automated defenses could concentrate fire. Ash's Pokémon adapted. Gengar phased through barriers and attacked turrets from behind. Sceptile used the facility's own structure as a jungle gym, scaling towers and cutting through energy conduits with Leaf Blade to disable barriers at their source. Charizard provided air support, strafing hybrid clusters with flamethrower runs that sent the mechanical abominations scattering. By the 6th node, Ash was running on adrenaline and something deeper, the same thing that had carried him through every crisis, every impossible battle, every moment when the smart move was to give up and he chose not to. Ash. The voice came from behind them. Not from the facility's speakers, not from Ultra Space's hallucinations. From a person. He turned. Dawn Berlitz stood at the edge of the facility's perimeter, Piplup at her side, her blue hair whipping in Ultra Space's sourceless wind. She was breathing hard. She'd run here, or flown, or somehow forced her way through a wormhole that should have been impassable. Behind her, Brock Harrison. White coat torn, face bruised, carrying a medical bag over one shoulder and a look of grim determination that Ash had last seen in the tribunal chamber. "Before you say anything," Dawn said, her voice cracking, "I know I don't have the right to be here. I know you don't owe me anything. But I couldn't." She stopped. Started again. "The whole world is watching. The wormholes are opening everywhere. People are fighting Ultra Beasts in Kanto, in Hoenn, in Sinnoh. And I couldn't sit there and do nothing while you. How did you get here?" Ash asked. "Cresselia." Dawn pulled a pokeball from her belt, and Ash blinked. "Tobias. He found us in Alola, Brock and me. He said you'd need backup. He gave me Cresselia and told me to follow the wormhole. Tobias sent you. He said he was going ahead. That he had something to do first." Dawn's eyes were red. She'd been crying, recently, and she hadn't tried to hide it. "Ash, I tried to testify for you. At the tribunal. They shut me down. They literally escorted me out of the building. I've been trying to reach you for weeks, I know." Ash's voice was quieter than he expected. "Whitfield told me." The silence that followed was heavy with everything unsaid. Dawn's lower lip trembled. Brock stood behind her, and his expression was the most complicated thing Ash had ever seen on the man's face, guilt and sorrow and stubborn courage all fighting for dominance. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Brock said. His voice was rough. "I said what I said at the tribunal and I meant it. You are dangerous. Your methods are extreme. People got hurt." He paused. Swallowed. "But I'm also the man who traveled with you across 4 regions, who watched you save the world more times than I can count, who knew, who knows, that you are the best person I've ever met. And both things are true. I told the interviewer that, and I meant that too." Ash looked at them. His oldest friends. The first people who'd ever believed in him, back when he was a kid who couldn't tell a cater pie from a Weedle. The anger was there. Sitting in his chest like an ember. It would be there for a long time. Maybe forever. But the world was ending, and Necrozma was dying, and he didn't have the luxury of holding grudges in the middle of a war. "Dawn, take the western perimeter. There are Ultra Beast hybrids, augmented, dangerous. Your ice types will have an advantage against the mechanized components. Brock, there are injured Pokémon throughout the facility, some of them are the hybrids. They're victims, not weapons. Do what you can." Dawn's eyes widened. Then she nodded, fierce and determined, and sprinted toward the western approach with Piplup evolving into Empoleon mid-run, the penguin Pokémon's steel typing already glowing in anticipation. Brock looked at Ash for a long moment. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Help." Brock nodded. He turned and ran toward the nearest cluster of downed hybrids, his medical bag already open, his hands steady with the competence that had never been in question. Ash watched him go. Then he turned back to the facility. 2 more nodes, Lusamine said. She'd watched the exchange without comment, but her eyes were soft. Let's finish this. They hit the 7th node hard and fast. By now, the facility's automated defenses were overwhelmed. Ash's team and the reinforcements from Dawn were systematically dismantling everything Aldrich had built. Lusamine disabled the 7th extraction beam in 90 seconds, her familiarity with the technology growing with each repetition. The 8th and final node was at the base of the central tower. The tower that held the human life sign. The tower that pointed like a spear at Necrozma's chained form. They approached it together, Ash, Lusamine, Pikachu, Greninja, Lucario. The rest of their teams held the perimeter. The tower's entrance was a massive doorway of reinforced alloy, sealed, with no visible control panel. I can breach it, Lucario growled, aura blazing. Wait. Ash held up his hand. Something felt wrong. The door was sealed, but there were no defenses around it. No turrets. No hybrids. Nothing. An invitation. The door opened on its own. Inside, the tower was hollow. A single massive chamber, walls lined with the extraction technology that channeled Necrozma's stolen light, every surface pulsing with prismatic energy. At the center of the chamber, a raised platform held the final node, the master control for the entire facility. And standing at the master control, his hands resting on the console, was Commissioner Aldrich. He looked exactly as he had at the tribunal. Immaculate. Composed. His silver-streaked hair perfectly combed, his league blacks pressed and creased, his gold pokeball insignia gleaming in the stolen light. He looked like a man attending a formal dinner, not standing in the heart of an interdimensional extraction facility. Mr. Ketchum, he said. His voice filled the chamber the same way it had filled the tribunal hall, smooth, measured, inevitable. I wondered how long it would take. It's over, Aldrich. Ash stepped into the chamber, Pikachu sparking on his shoulder. We've disabled 7 of your extraction nodes. This is the last one. Shut it down. Aldrich didn't move. He looked at Ash with the same slate-gray eyes that had presided over his destruction, and his expression was not anger, not fear, not even surprise. It was disappointment. You still don't understand, Aldrich said. After everything, the tribunal, the exile, the invasion, you still think this is about you. I think this is about you chaining a god and building a weapon to enslave every Pokemon on the planet. Something flickered in Aldrich's eyes. Project Harness isn't slavery. It's salvation. He turned to the console and pressed a sequence of commands. A holographic display bloomed above the platform, a map of the world, overlaid with the red wormhole markers Ash had seen before. But now the map showed something else, green markers, thousands of them, scattered across every region. Every green point is a registered Pokemon trainer, Aldrich said. 600 million Pokemon in human hands across the world. 600 million creatures of immense power, controlled by nothing more than the fragile bond between them and their trainers. A bond that can break. A bond that can be manipulated. A bond that, in the hands of someone like you, Ash, can level cities. He swept his hand across the display. In the past decade alone, Pokemon-related destruction has increased by 400%. Ultra Beast incursions. Legendary Pokemon conflicts. Trainers pushing their Pokemon to levels of power that no safety protocol can contain. The system is failing. The bond between humans and Pokemon was never designed for this scale, this intensity, this recklessness. So your solution is to override it? Lusamine's voice was sharp as glass. To steal a god's light and use it to control every Pokemon on Earth? My solution is to ensure that no trainer, no matter how gifted, how well-intentioned, how beloved, can ever cause the kind of devastation that you caused in Lumio City. Aldrich looked at Ash, and the disappointment in his eyes was genuine. I watched your battle with Tobias today. Magnificent. Truly. But that magnificence destroyed a battle platform, generated shockwaves visible from orbit, and could have killed everyone in the observation gallery if a single attack had gone wide. You are the argument for Project Harness, Ash. You personally. The most powerful trainer alive, and you can't be controlled, can't be contained, can't be reasoned with. Because I'm not supposed to be controlled. Ash stepped forward. Pokemon aren't weapons to be regulated. They're partners. Friends. Family. The bond between a trainer and their Pokemon isn't a bug in the system, it's the whole point. The whole point. Aldrich's voice was cold. Tell that to the girl in Lumiose with scars on her arm. Tell that to Clemence Magneton, buried alive. Tell that to every civilian who's ever been caught in the crossfire of your magnificent partnership. The words hit like physical blows. Because they were true. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to make Ash's jaw clench and his fists tighten and the anger flare hot and bright. Lusamine stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but Ash could hear the edge, the woman who'd built this technology warring with the woman who'd rebuilt herself from its wreckage. You're killing Necrozma, Aldrich. Every second this facility operates, it drains more of its light. If Necrozma dies, the dimensional barrier collapses. Every ultra beast in existence pours into our world. The destruction you're trying to prevent becomes a permanent apocalypse. Necrozma won't die, Aldrich said. The extraction is calibrated to maintain minimum viability. The barrier weakens, yes. Controlled weakening. Enough to demonstrate the threat, to show the world that the current system can't protect them. Enough to justify Project Harness in the eyes of every government, every league, every person who's ever watched a Pokemon battle and wondered what would happen if those powers were turned against them. You're creating the crisis to justify the cure, Ash said. The realization settled over him like ice water. The wormholes, the Ultra Beast attacks, the invasion of Ether Paradise, you engineered all of it. You weakened the barrier on purpose to scare the world into accepting your control system. I gave the world a reason to listen. Aldrich's voice didn't waver. Because reason alone wasn't enough. I tried reason, Ash. I tried reform. I tried working within the system. The system doesn't work. Trainers are too powerful, too independent, too convinced of their own righteousness. The only way to protect the world from people like you is to make people like you irrelevant. He pressed another command. The holographic display changed, showing a satellite in orbit, sleek and dark, with a massive dish pointed at the Earth below. Project Harness is already deployed. The satellite has been in orbit for 6 months, powered by Necrozma's energy, waiting for sufficient charge to activate. When I press this, his finger hovered over a final command, every Pokeball on the planet receives an override signal. Every Pokemon currently captured becomes unresponsive to their trainer's commands. They won't be harmed. They'll simply stop listening. And they'll respond only to the harness frequency. My frequency. The chamber went silent. The extraction beams hummed. Necrozma's dying light pulsed through the walls. You're insane, Lusamine whispered. I'm the only sane person in a world that handed godlike power to children and called it a sport. Aldrich's finger moved toward the command. A blade of darkness cut through the air and severed the console's power conduit. Aldrich stumbled backward as the console sparked and went dark. The holographic display flickered and died. The extraction beam from the final node stuttered. From the shadows of the chamber's upper structure, a figure dropped, landing between Aldrich and the console with the silent precision of someone who'd been waiting. Tobias. His dark ray floated behind him, its cyan eye burning, the night slash still dissipating from its claws. Tobias looked at Aldrich, and his pale eyes held something that Ash had never seen in them before. Revulsion. I believed in order, Tobias said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the chamber. I believed that power should be wielded by the worthy. That the strong had a responsibility to guide the weak. I followed you because I thought you understood that. He looked at Necrozma, the chained god, the dying light, the fracture spreading through its crystalline body. This isn't order. This isn't guidance. This is a man so afraid of what he can't control that he'd cage a god and enslave a world to feel safe. Tobias turned back to Aldrich. I'm done. Aldrich's composure cracked. For the first time, the mask slipped, and beneath it was not a visionary or a reformer but a man watching his life's work crumble. His hand shot to his belt, a pokeball, one Ash hadn't seen before, marked with strange symbols. You think I didn't prepare for betrayal? Aldrich snarled. He pressed the ball, and it opened with a sound like tearing silk. The creature that emerged was wrong. Not an ultra beast, something else. Something made. A chimera of stolen light and forced evolution, a Pokemon-shaped void that burned with Necrozma's fractured energy. It had no species. No classification. It was Project Harness given form, a living weapon built from the light of a dying god. It screamed, and the sound cracked the crystal floor. Pikachu, Ash didn't get to finish the command. The chimera moved, fast, impossibly fast, faster than anything that size should have been able to move. It struck the ground where Ash had been standing a half-second before, and the impact sent a shockwave through the chamber that threw everyone backward. Lucario intercepted the second strike, Aura Sphere meeting the chimera's energy blast in a detonation that filled the chamber with blinding light. Greninja hit it from behind, Water Shuriken, Rapid Fire, and the chimera screamed again, whirling, lashing out with tendrils of stolen light that carved grooves in the chamber walls. Tobias's Dark Ray engaged from above, Shadow Ball, Dark Pulse, Night Daze, a barrage of darkness that should have overwhelmed any Pokemon. The chimera absorbed it. Drew it in. Grew. It feeds on energy attacks, Lusamine shouted. She was at the damaged console, working frantically, her tools buried in the sparking circuitry. It's a capacitor, the more energy you throw at it, the stronger it gets. Then we don't use energy, Ash said. Lucario, close combat. Greninja, physical attacks only. Pikachu, the chimera lunged for Lusamine. Ash moved before he thought. He threw himself between the chimera and Lusamine, and Pikachu launched from his shoulder, and what happened next wasn't a technique or a strategy. It was instinct. 11 years of partnership compressed into a single moment. Pikachu's iron tail met the chimera's energy tendril. The physical attack didn't feed it, it disrupted it. The tendril shattered like glass, and the chimera recoiled, its form flickering. Physical attacks disrupt its cohesion. Ash shouted. Everyone, close quarters. No energy moves. The battle collapsed into a brawl. Lucario's close combat hammered the chimera's body, each fist strike sending cracks through its stolen light form. Greninja's cut and night slash carved into it with precision. Pikachu bounced off walls and ceiling, Iron Tail connecting again and again. Even Lusamine's Beware waded in, its enormous paws striking with the raw physical force that no energy capacity could absorb. The chimera fought back, savagely, desperately, its form destabilizing with each hit but regenerating from the stolen light that still pulsed through the facility's systems. As long as the final extraction node was active, it could draw on Necrozma's energy to rebuild itself. Lusamine, the node. I'm trying. She was elbow-deep in the console, tools sparking, her face set in the focused fury of a genius working against a deadline measured in seconds. The chimera lunged again, past Lucario, past Greninja, straight for Lusamine. Tobias's Dark Ray intercepted, taking the hit meant for her. The pitch-black Pokemon staggered, its shadowy form damaged in ways that regular attacks couldn't have caused. The chimera's stolen light was anathema to darkness, it burned Dark Ray from the inside. Dark Ray. Tobias's composure broke. He lunged forward, recalled his Pokemon, and stood between the chimera and Lusamine with nothing but his body and his conviction. Pikachu. Ash screamed. Iron Tail, the core. Hit the center mass. Pikachu didn't hesitate. He launched from the ceiling, a yellow meteor, tail blazing silver, and struck the Chimera dead center. Not with electricity. Not with energy. With the simple, devastating force of a Pokémon who'd been fighting since he was born, channeled through a steel-hard tail, aimed with the precision of a decade of training. The Chimera cracked. A fracture line split its body from top to bottom, and the stolen light inside began to leak, not in beams, but in drops, like blood from a wound. Got it. Lusamine ripped a final component from the console, and the 8th extraction beam died. The effect was immediate. Without the steady flow of Necrozma's energy, the Chimera's regeneration stopped. The crack in its body widened. The stolen light inside flickered, dimmed, and began to dissipate. The Chimera screamed one last time, a sound of rage and pain and something almost like grief, and then it came apart. Not violently. Quietly. The stolen light dispersed into the air like mist, drifting upward through the chamber's open ceiling, returning to the source it had been torn from. Aldrich stared at the empty space where his weapon had been. His hands hung at his sides. His face was gray. "It's over," Ash said. "No." Aldrich's voice was a whisper. "No, it's not. The satellite harness is still deployed. I don't need the Chimera, I just need the signal. The extraction stored enough energy to power one activation. One global pulse. Every Pokémon on the planet goes silent." His hand moved to his pocket, a remote device, small, blinking with a single red light. "You can stop me here. You can destroy this facility. But you can't stop a signal traveling at the speed of light." His thumb moved toward the button. Tobias hit him. Not with a Pokémon. Not with a strategy. With his fist. The punch connected with Aldrich's jaw, and the commissioner crumpled, the remote flying from his hand, spinning across the crystal floor. Tobias caught it. Held it. Looked at the blinking red light. Then he crushed it in his fist. The components cracked and went dark. Tobias opened his hand and let the pieces fall. "You don't get to cage the world," Tobias said, standing over Aldrich's slumped form. "Not even to save it." Aldrich looked up from the floor. His lip was split. His immaculate appearance was ruined. And in his slate-gray eyes, Ash saw not the mastermind, not the commissioner, not the man who'd orchestrated his downfall, just a person. A frightened, brilliant, broken person who'd looked at a world of chaos and chosen control because he couldn't bear the alternative. "You'll regret this," Aldrich whispered. "The next time someone's city burns, the next time someone's child is caught in the crossfire, the next time a trainer pushes too hard and people die, you'll remember this moment and wish you'd let me press that button." "Maybe," Ash said. "But the answer to fear isn't cages. It never was." He turned away from Aldrich. Turned toward the chamber's ceiling, toward the open sky of ultra-space, where Necrozma's diminished form hung in its chains of now-dead technology. The extraction beams were gone. All 8 nodes disabled. But Necrozma was still chained, the physical anchors remained, and the prism Pokémon was too weak to break free on its own. "Lusamine. Can we release the physical restraints?" "From here, yes. The console's damaged, but I can reroute, give me a minute." She dove back into the sparking console, working with the desperate focus of a woman making amends for a sin she hadn't known she'd committed. Ash looked up at Necrozma. The ancient Pokémon's glow was faint, barely visible, a ghost of the radiance that had once held worlds apart. Its crystalline body was fractured, diminished, cracked like old glass. He felt Pikachu tense on his shoulder. Felt the bond between them pulse, the connection that Aldrich called dangerous, that the tribunal called reckless, that Ash called everything. "You're going to be okay," Ash said to Necrozma. He didn't know if the Pokémon could hear him. He didn't know if words meant anything to a being that had existed since before language. But he said it anyway, because some things needed to be said even when they might not be heard. Restraints released. Lusamine called. The anchors detached. Metal clamps fell away. Energy tethers dissolved. And Necrozma, the prism Pokemon, the light of the dimensional barrier, the god in chains, was free. For a long moment, nothing happened. Necrozma hung in the violet sky, motionless, its cracked body barely glowing. Ash's heart hammered. Had they been too late? Had the extraction drained too much? Then Necrozma moved. It was small at first, a tremor, a shift, a repositioning of crystalline limbs that had been locked in place for months. Then the glow intensified. Not to full radiance, not yet, but brightening, steadying, the light inside finding its rhythm again like a heart remembering how to beat. The fractured pieces of Necrozma's body, the shards that had fallen through wormholes, that had landed at Akala Island and elsewhere across the world, began to return. Ash watched as points of light appeared on the horizon of ultra space, converging on Necrozma from every direction, drawn by the gravity of the whole calling its pieces home. The shards connected. Fractures sealed. Cracks filled with fresh light. Necrozma grew, not just in size, but in presence, in weight, in the fundamental reality of a being that existed at the intersection of dimensions. Its body reformed, its radiance swelled, and the violet sky of ultra space began to brighten. The wormhole above Ether Paradise, the wound in the sky that had been bleeding ultra beasts for hours, began to close. Not violently, not with a snap. Gently. Like a wound healing. Like the world remembering how to be whole. Necrozma looked down at them. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were prisms of pure light, faceted and ancient and filled with an intelligence that made human thought feel like a candle beside a sun. It looked at Ash. At Lusamine. At the facility that had been its prison. At the broken man on the floor who'd built it. Ash felt it, not words, not language, but meaning. Gratitude, vast and ancient. And something else. A gift. The light intensified until it was all there was, white, pure, warm, washing through the chamber, through the facility, through ultra space itself. It washed through Ash and he felt it in his bones, in his blood, in the bond between him and Pikachu and every Pokemon he'd ever partnered with. It was the light that held worlds apart and held them together. The light that made the space between dimensions not a void but a bridge. When it faded, Necrozma was gone, risen into ultra space, into the barrier itself, into the place where it belonged. The dimensional membrane was reforming, the fractures healing, the red markers on Lusamine's maps winking out one by one as wormholes across the world sealed shut. And the extraction facility, drained of its stolen power, began to collapse. Time to leave, Ash said. They ran. Tobias dragged Aldrich. The commissioner was conscious but dazed, unresisting, his grand vision lying in pieces around him. Lusamine led the way back through the facility, her scanner guiding them through corridors that were buckling and cracking as the crystal foundations gave way. Ash's Pokemon cleared the path, Charizard melting through blocked passages, Greninja cutting through debris, Lucario punching through walls that had lost their structural integrity. They burst into the open air of ultra space just as the facility's central tower imploded. The sound was enormous, a thunderclap of collapsing metal and shattering crystal, and the shockwave knocked them flat. Ash covered Lusamine with his body, and Pikachu covered Ash, and for a moment the world was nothing but noise and dust and the ground shaking beneath them. Then silence. Ash looked up. The facility was rubble, a crater in ultra space's crystal landscape, already being reclaimed by the alien geology. The extraction technology was destroyed. Project Harness was dead. The wormhole that had brought them here was still open, barely. A shrinking circle of dimensional breach, its edges drawing inward like a closing eye. Transport. Now. Lusamine shouted. They made it. Barely. The transport launched from behind the crystal outcrop where they'd landed, Lusamine at the controls, Ash strapped in behind her, Tobias and Aldrich in the rear compartment. They hit the wormhole at full speed, and the dimensional transit was rougher this time, the barrier healing around them, the passage closing even as they flew through it. They emerged into Alola's sky, and the wormhole sealed behind them with a sound like the world exhaling. Below them, Ether Paradise was battered but standing. The electromagnetic barrier still held. The defense teams were mopping up the last of the Ultra Beasts. And from every window, every observation deck, every transparent wall of the floating fortress, 500 people were looking up at the sky where the wormhole had been. It was gone. The sky was clear. Stars and moonlight and the distant glow of Alola's islands, clean and whole and unbroken. Lusamine landed the transport on the main platform. When the hatch opened, Glad Ion was there. Lily was there. Dawn and Brock, having returned through the wormhole before them, were there. Ether staff and security teams and medical personnel and researchers, all of them crowding the platform, all of them staring. Ash stepped out. Pikachu on his shoulder. His team at his back. Covered in crystal dust and chimera residue and the lingering light of a god he'd helped set free. Glad Ion looked at Lusamine. She nodded, a small, exhausted nod. He crossed the platform in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around his mother, and Lusamine's composure finally, completely broke. She held her son and she shook, and Lily was there too, and for a moment they were just a family, broken and healing in together. Ash gave them space. He walked to the platform's edge and sat down, legs dangling over the ocean, and Pikachu curled up in his lap, and he breathed. Dawn sat down beside him. She didn't say anything for a while. They watched the ocean and the stars and the healed sky. "You're not going to forgive me," she said. "Not a question. You didn't do anything that needs forgiving. You tried to stand up for me. They shut you down. I could have tried harder. You tried enough." He looked at her. "You came here. Through ultra space. Against ultra beasts and a madman's chimera. That's not nothing." Dawn's eyes were bright. She nodded, pressing her lips together. Brock approached from behind. He stood for a moment, uncertain, the most uncertain Ash had ever seen him. Then he sat down on Ash's other side. "I'm not going to apologize for what I said at the tribunal," Brock said. "You are dangerous. Your methods are extreme. People did get hurt. I know. But I should have said the rest. I should have said that you saved more lives than you endangered. That the world owes you more than it can ever repay. That you're the best friend I've ever had and I failed you when it mattered." Ash was quiet for a long time. The waves broke against Ether Paradise's hull, a steady rhythm that had nothing to do with tribunals or betrayals or the end of the world. "I understand why you did it," he said. "I don't forgive you yet. Maybe I will. But not today." Brock nodded. His eyes were red, but his jaw was set. "Okay," he said. "Not today." Dawn reached over and put her hand on Ash's arm. Brock sat in silence. And the 3 of them, the first friends, the oldest bonds, damaged and real, sat together and watched the stars over a world that had almost ended and didn't. The next 48 hours were a blur. Tobias turned Aldrich over to the international police, not the League, which was fracturing under the weight of the revelations. Jenny units from 6 regions converged on Alola, and the story unfolded across every screen in the world: Commissioner Aldrich's conspiracy, Project Harness, the extraction of Necrozma, the manufactured Ultra Beast crisis. The evidence was overwhelming: Lusamine's data, Lily's recovered files, Tobias's first-hand testimony, the wreckage of the facility recovered from ultra space before the last wormhole sealed. Aldrich didn't deny it. Sitting in an international police holding facility, his suit rumpled, his composure gone, he gave a statement that was broadcast worldwide: "I regret the methods. I don't regret the goal. Pokémon are too powerful to be left unregulated in the hands of individuals. Today it was stopped. Tomorrow, someone else will try. Because the fundamental problem hasn't changed, you've given children the power of gods and called it a journey. The statement divided the world. Some people agreed with him, more than Ash wanted to think about. But more didn't. Because they'd watched the broadcast. They'd seen what happened when one man tried to control every Pokemon on Earth. And they'd seen who stopped him. Not a government. Not a military. A trainer and his Pikachu and the people who chose to stand beside them. The League's governing council convened an emergency session. Half of Aldrich's appointees resigned. The other half were removed. The tribunal verdict against Ash was vacated, unanimously, publicly, with a formal statement that used words like miscarriage and manipulation and profound institutional failure. They offered him his championship back. The message came through official channels, a formal communication from the interim league president, delivered to Ether Paradise by priority courier. Ash read it in Lusamine's office, sitting in the chair he'd occupied on that first late night when she'd shown him the telemetry and they'd started trusting each other. Lusamine sat across from him, her reading glasses on, a cup of tea in her hands. She'd slept for the first time in 3 days, and the shadows under her eyes were fading, and she looked, not soft, Lusamine was never soft, but settled. Present. A woman who'd faced the worst of herself and the worst of the world in the same week and was still sitting upright. They want me back, Ash said, setting down the letter. Of course they do. You saved the world. Again. The League needs a symbol, and you're the best one they've ever had. You think I should accept? Lusamine took off her glasses and looked at him. The green of her eyes was deeper than usual, the aftermath of tears she'd shed in private and would never admit to. But they were clear, and steady, and when they met his, the connection between them was as real as a physical touch. I think you should do whatever makes you feel whole, she said. Not what the League wants. Not what the public wants. Not even what I want. What makes you whole? Ash looked at the letter. Official letterhead. Gold embossing. The weight of institutional authority, trying to reclaim a man it had thrown away. He thought about the championship. The battles. The glory. The standing ovations and the magazine covers and the way a stadium full of people chanting his name felt like the world itself was holding him up. He thought about the tribunal. The testimonies. The sound of the door locking behind him in the holding room. The look on Serena's face. The sound of Brock's steady, devastating honesty. He thought about this place. This kingdom of glass and light, floating on the ocean, filled with people who were fighting to protect a world that didn't always deserve protecting. He thought about Gladion's grudging respect and Lily's quiet steel and Guzma, who'd shown up 2 days ago with a crew of former Skull Grunts, taken one look at the damage and said, "Yo, who do I punch?" and then spent 48 hours doing repair work without being asked. He thought about Lusamine. Her failures and her fire. Her guilt and her brilliance. The way she looked at him like he mattered, not as a champion or a symbol, but as a person. The way she'd stood beside him in ultra space and said, "I'm real, and I'm here." The way she laughed when she wasn't performing. The way her hand felt in his. He picked up a pen and wrote 3 words on the back of the letter. I decline. As he folded the letter and slid it across the desk to Lusamine. She read it. Looked at him. And the smile that broke across her face was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Are you sure? I'm not their champion anymore. I'm something else now. What's that? I'm working on it. He stood, stretched, and walked to the window. The ocean gleamed in the morning light, and Ether Paradise hummed with the energy of a kingdom rebuilding itself. But it starts here. With this place. With you. With whatever comes next. Lusamine rose and stood beside him. She was taller than him in her heels, she always wore the heels, and the morning light caught her hair and turned it to gold. You know, she said, running a sovereign territory during an interdimensional crisis is technically more work than being world champion. But the company's better. Flatterer. Realist. She bumped her shoulder against his, a small, casual gesture that meant more than any grand romantic declaration. The gesture of someone who decided to stay. Below them, through the glass, the facility was alive. Repairs were underway. Conservation domes were being restored. On the training platform, Glad Ion was battling one of the ether security officers, his silverly moving with the sharp efficiency of a Pokémon whose trainer had finally stopped being afraid. Near the docks, Guzma was directing his crew in hauling debris, his Golisopod doing the heavy lifting while Guzma himself provided commentary that was 60% profanity and 40% surprisingly competent engineering advice. In the medical wing, Brock was working. He'd stayed, not asked, not invited, just stayed. He was treating the hybrid ultra beasts that had survived the facility's collapse, carefully removing their mechanical augmentations, rehabilitating the creatures beneath. It was the most Brock thing possible, seeing pain and fixing it, regardless of where it came from. Dawn was there too, helping Lily catalog the data recovered from ultra space. She was good at it, organized, thorough, bringing the same meticulous energy to research that she brought to Pokémon contests. She and Lily had hit it off immediately, bonding over shared experiences of being underestimated and proving everyone wrong. The world was healing. Not perfectly. Not quickly. The wormholes were sealed, but the scars remained, damaged cities, traumatized populations, a league in crisis. Misty and Serena hadn't reached out. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe the distance between who they'd been and who they'd chosen to be was too wide to bridge. Ash held space for them in his mind, not forgiveness, not bitterness, just acknowledgement. They'd made their choices. He'd made his. But the sky was clear. The barrier held. Necrozma's light burned bright in the space between worlds, and the Pokémon of the Earth were free, and the man who tried to cage them was sitting in a cell learning the difference between control and courage. Pikachu trotted into the office, a berry in his mouth that he'd clearly stolen from the conservation dome. He jumped to the windowsill, looked at Ash and Lusamine standing together in the morning light, and rolled his eyes with the exaggerated patience of a Pokémon who had been dealing with human romantic tension for weeks and was deeply over it. Then he sparked happily, stuffed the berry in his mouth, and went back to sleep in a sunbeam. Ash laughed. Lusamine leaned against him. And outside the glass walls of their kingdom, the sun climbed over Alola, painting the ocean gold, and the day began. It was evening when they found each other on the observation deck again. The same place where they'd kissed for the first time, after the battle with Tobias. The same railing, the same view, the same wind carrying the scent of salt and flowers. But everything else was different. They were different. The world was different. Lusamine leaned on the railing, her lab coat abandoned in her office, wearing a simple white dress that the wind pressed against her frame. She looked tired in the good way, the tiredness of someone who'd done something that mattered and could finally stop running. Ash stood beside her. No cap, he'd left it in their quarters. His hair, freed from years of being crammed under a hat, was dark and unruly and caught the sunset light in a way that Lusamine found unreasonably distracting. "Glad Ion told me something today," she said. "Threatening something?" He said. She paused, and the smile she was suppressing broke free for a moment. "He said that if I'm going to be with you, he expects to be consulted on all major decisions. Strategic, operational, and personal. That's very Glad Ion. That's very my son." She turned to him. The sunset caught her eyes and turned them to amber green again, the same color they'd been on the night that changed everything. "Lily said something too. Also threatening. She said you're good for me. That she's never seen me this present. This, here." Lusamine's voice softened on the last word. "She said I should hold on to that. Smart kid. She gets it from me." Lusamine took a breath. "Ash. I need to ask you something," and I need you to answer honestly. I haven't lied to you yet. I know. That's why I'm asking. She faced him squarely, and the mask was gone, completely, fully gone. Just Lusamine. The brilliant, damaged, fierce, lonely, extraordinary woman who'd found him on a beach and offered him a kingdom. What do you want? Not what the League wants, not what the world wants. What do you want? Ash looked at her. At the kingdom behind her, gleaming in the dying light. At the ocean before her, vast and dark and full of possibility. At the sky above, healed and whole and holding. He thought about the question. He owed it the same honesty she'd given him. He could have said many things. He could have talked about purpose, about fighting the next threat, about building something that would protect the world without caging it. He could have talked about redemption, about proving that the tribunal was wrong, about earning back the trust he'd lost. But those were the big answers. The speech answers. The ones that sounded good on broadcasts and in memoirs. She hadn't asked for those. She'd asked what he wanted. You, he said. One word. Simple. True. The most honest thing he'd ever said. Lusamine's breath caught. Not dramatically. Just a small, sharp intake, the sound of someone hearing something they'd wanted to hear but hadn't dared to expect. Just that, she whispered. Just that. She kissed him. Or he kissed her. It didn't matter, they met in the middle, the way they always did, and the kiss was slow and deep and tasted like salt and tea and the impossible sweetness of two people who'd been broken by the world and chose each other anyway. When they pulled apart, the sun was gone, and the stars were out, and the kingdom of glass glowed beneath them like a crown of light held above the ocean. For the record, Lusamine murmured against his lips, that's the best answer anyone's ever given to anything. I have my moments. She laughed, really laughed, and pulled him closer, and they stood together on the observation deck while the stars wheeled overhead and the ocean sang beneath them, and Pikachu, who had followed them up here because he followed Ash everywhere and always would, sat on the railing and watched the horizon with the quiet satisfaction of a Pokémon who'd seen a lot of sunsets and knew a good one when he saw it. The small yellow Pokémon's cheeks sparked once, warmly, gently, and then he closed his eyes and let the night settle around them all. Below, the kingdom hummed. Around them, the world turned. Above them, in the space between dimensions, Necrozma's light burned steady and strong, holding the barrier that kept the worlds apart and the bridge that kept them connected. And Ash Ketchum, former champion, fugitive, exile, king, stood in the place he'd chosen, with the person he'd chosen, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he was home. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.